The moment that changed everything is burned into my memory with perfect clarity. The weight of the crystal champagne flute in my hand, the stifling heaviness of forced composure on my face, the sound of enthusiastic applause filling the Grand Peninsula Hotel ballroom as my father announced the new CEO of Wilson Innovations, and it wasn't me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 10 years of my life. 10 years of transforming a failing family business into a $100 million tech powerhouse. 10 years of missed birthdays, canceled vacations, and relationships sacrificed on the altar of success. All for this moment of profound betrayal, marked by my mother's beaming smile as she squeezed my sister's hand and whispered, "Isn't this wonderful, Jamie?" It wasn't always like this. When I joined Wilson Innovations a decade ago, we were a struggling software consultancy on the brink of irrelevance. 20 employees crammed into a dreary office park on the outskirts of Seattle, outdated infrastructure, and clients steadily migrating to more innovative competitors. My father, Robert Wilson, had founded the company with my grandfather in the early days of enterprise software, and for years they'd enjoyed modest success providing IT solutions to local businesses. But the tech landscape had shifted dramatically, and Wilson Innovations hadn't evolved with it. I had just completed my MBA at Stanford with multiple job offers from Silicon Valley giants. The rational choice was obvious. Accept the six-figure salary at a prestigious tech firm, build my career on solid ground. Instead, I found myself drawn back to Seattle by my father's appeal. The family business needs you, Jamie. Your fresh perspective could turn things around. Looking back, I recognize the irony in those words. My fresh perspective was valuable when the company was failing, but apparently disposable once it succeeded. Those first months were brutal. I worked 18-hour days analyzing what remained of our client base, our technical capabilities, and potential growth markets. The diagnosis was clear. We needed to pivot from general IT consulting to specialized development in an emerging field. Artificial intelligence for healthcare presented the perfect opportunity: high barriers to entry, significant growth potential, and a chance to do meaningful work that could genuinely improve patient outcomes. My father resisted initially. "We're software consultants, Jamie. We always have been. This AI healthcare thing is speculative at best." The argument stretched over weeks, with me presenting market research, potential client lists, and detailed financial projections. Eventually, he relented, though not without the parting shot. "It's your show now. Make it work, or we shut down in 6 months." That ultimatum became my driving force. I slept on a couch in my cramped office more nights than I care to remember, subsisting on vending machine snacks and sheer determination. I personally recruited our first AI specialists, promising competitive salaries we couldn't yet afford, and equity in a company that might not survive. I cold-called dozens of healthcare providers, securing meetings through persistence alone, pitching our vision for diagnostic AI systems that could augment physician decision-making. The breakthrough came when Northwest Medical Center agreed to pilot our first rudimentary algorithm, designed to flag potential diagnostic oversights in their radiology department. The system was basic compared to what we would eventually build, but it caught 3 significant misdiagnoses in its first month of operation. Word spread through medical circles, and suddenly we had a waiting list of interested hospitals. MediMind, as we branded our diagnostic AI platform, grew from that humble beginning. Version 2.0 expanded beyond radiology to analyze lab results and patient histories, identifying patterns human physicians might miss. Version 3.0 incorporated natural language processing to scan medical literature and suggest treatment options. With each iteration, our client base expanded and our reputation solidified. We outgrew the dreary office park within 2 years, relocating to a gleaming downtown Seattle high-rise with our illuminated blue logo visible across the skyline. Our staff expanded to 50, then 100, then over 200 talented developers, data scientists, and healthcare specialists. Revenue followed an equally impressive trajectory. $5 million, $20 million, $50 million, and finally breaking the $100 million mark just last quarter. Throughout this transformation, my sister Olivia remained conspicuously absent. While I was rebuilding our family company, she was exploring her passion for travel photography, sending occasional postcards from remote locations, and appearing at holiday gatherings with exotic gifts and fascinating stories. I envied her freedom. Sometimes, especially during those weeks when I wouldn't see sunlight outside office windows. But I never resented her choices. We had different priorities, different dreams. Or so I thought. 8 months ago, Olivia returned to Seattle permanently, announcing she was ready to put down roots after years of nomadic existence. My father immediately created a position for her, Director of Creative Strategy, a title with no clear responsibilities but a generous salary. I didn't object. The company could afford it, and family is family. Besides, Olivia has always possessed natural charisma and people skills I sometimes lack, qualities that could potentially benefit our client relationships. If I'm being honest, there were warning signs I chose to ignore. The increasing frequency of closed-door meetings between Olivia and my father, the casual questions about our client contracts and intellectual property arrangements, the subtle shift in how board members began deferring to her opinions on matters she had no experience with. I was too immersed in launching MediMind 4.0 to recognize the power dynamics shifting beneath my feet. Which brings me back to that moment in the Grand Peninsula Hotel ballroom. Our company's 25th anniversary celebration, meticulously planned to showcase our unprecedented growth and technological achievements. White linen tablecloths adorned with centerpieces of blue orchids, matching our corporate colors. The room filled with board members, key healthcare partners, and employees who had been with us through the transformation. An evening meant to celebrate success, not orchestrate my professional execution. My father stood at the podium, silver, hair perfectly styled, custom navy suit emphasizing his still impressive physique at 68. Wilson Innovation stands at a pivotal moment in its history, he began, his resonant voice carrying across the silent room. 25 years ago, my father and I started a small software consultancy with big dreams. Today, thanks to the dedication of everyone in this room, we've achieved what once seemed impossible: $100 million in annual revenue and a leadership position in healthcare AI. I smiled modestly at the applause, expecting my father to acknowledge my role in this transformation. Instead, he continued, "As we look to the future, fresh leadership will guide Wilson Innovations to even greater heights. Leadership with global perspective, creative vision, and bold ideas." My smile froze as unease crept up my spine. As I approach retirement, I'm thrilled to announce that Olivia Wilson will be taking over as CEO of Wilson Innovations next month. The room erupted in applause. Across the table, my mother squeezed Olivia's hand, her face glowing with maternal pride. Olivia herself managed to appear simultaneously surprised and prepared, rising gracefully to join our father at the podium. I sat immobilized, wine glass half raised, face locked in what I hoped resembled congratulatory pleasure rather than stunned betrayal. "Thank you, Dad," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the supposed surprise. "I'm honored by this opportunity and excited to lead Wilson Innovations into its next chapter. While I have big shoes to fill, I bring a fresh perspective on where we can take this company. Jamie has built an incredible foundation with MediMind, and now we have the chance to expand beyond healthcare into exciting new markets." Beyond healthcare? The word sent alarm bells ringing. Our entire business model, client relationships, and technical expertise were centered on healthcare AI. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. expanding beyond, would mean abandoning the specialized niche we had painstakingly carved out over a decade. Throughout Olivia's speech, I maintained my composure, nodding at appropriate moments, raising my glass for the toast to Wilson Innovation's bright future. Years of business negotiations had taught me to mask my emotions, a skill that served me well as colleagues approached with awkward combinations of congratulations and condolences. "You've done amazing work, Jamie. The company wouldn't be where it is without you. This must be bittersweet, but I'm sure you'll enjoy having more free time. Olivia mentioned you'll be staying on in a technical capacity. That's good news." Each well-intentioned comment twisted the knife deeper. A technical capacity. After 10 years as the de facto leader, I was being relegated to a supporting role. Not because of performance issues or strategic disagreements, but simply because my father had decided it was time for his daughter to have her turn at the helm. I excused myself from the celebration as soon as decently possible, citing an early morning meeting with a potential healthcare partner in Portland. In reality, I couldn't bear another minute of watching Olivia accept accolades for success she had no part in building. I needed space to think, to plan, to decide how to respond to this blindside attack on everything I'd created. The drive to my downtown apartment should have been calming. Seattle at night has always been my favorite view. The twinkling skyline reflected in Elliott Bay, Mount Rainier occasionally visible on clear evenings, looming like a sentinel over the city. Tonight, I barely registered the scenery, my mind, racing with calculations, contingencies, and a growing sense of righteous anger. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my dress shoes and poured 3 fingers of 25-year-old Macallan Scotch, a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. This wasn't the celebration I'd imagined, but it seemed fitting nonetheless. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same view I'd promised myself when working from that dreary office park during those first desperate months. "To the next chapter," I whispered, the expensive scotch burning a path down my throat. I hadn't cried since I was 14, and my father told me that my idea for a coding camp for disadvantaged kids was impractical idealism. I hadn't cried when I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford, and he skipped the ceremony for a business conference. I hadn't cried when I received multiple job offers from prestigious tech firms, only to be told the family business needed me more. And I wouldn't cry now, even as 10 years of sacrifice evaporated in a single evening of familial betrayal. Instead, I did what I always do when faced with a problem. I analyzed it methodically. I opened my laptop and pulled up the company records. Wilson Innovations had been worth approximately $3 million when I joined, a fair valuation for a struggling regional IT consultancy with an outdated business model. I scrolled through year-by-year growth charts, product development timelines, and client acquisition data, all meticulously documented. The pivot to healthcare AI in year 1. The development of our proprietary diagnostic algorithms in years 2 and 3. The expansion into predictive analytics in year 4. Each strategic decision, each technological breakthrough, each major client acquisition bearing my signature, my vision, my countless hours of labor. There it was in cold, hard numbers, a 33x increase in company valuation, from $3 million to $100 million under my leadership. Not through market bubbles or accounting gimmicks, but through genuine innovation and value creation. And now my reward was a demotion to technical capacity, while my sister, who had spent the decade building her Instagram following instead of building the company, would reap the rewards of my work. The injustice burned hotter than the scotch in my veins. But unlike my father and sister, I wouldn't act on emotion alone. I needed leverage, and leverage comes from information. I pulled up our corporate governance documents, scanning for anything that might strengthen my position. The ownership structure confirmed what I already knew. My father still held 60% of company shares. I owned 25%, gradually granted as performance bonuses. and the remaining 15% was distributed among early investors and key employees. Based on traditional corporate governance, my father had the legal right to appoint the CEO, regardless of how misguided that appointment might be. But then I noticed something interesting in the original LLC agreement, drafted when my grandfather and father founded the company. Section 12.3 contained specific language about succession planning. Any family member who has worked in the business for at least 5 years and developed a product line generating more than 25% of annual revenue is entitled to proportional decision-making authority in their area of expertise. I leaned back, mind racing. MediMind, the product I had conceived and developed, generated over 60% of our current revenue. According to this clause, I was entitled to proportional decision-making authority over our core business, regardless of titles or my father's wishes. Further digging revealed that this provision had never been amended or removed during subsequent corporate restructurings. Next, I examined our intellectual property agreements. Every major innovation developed during my tenure had my name on the patents as primary inventor. The company licensed these patents, but under specific governance conditions that I had insisted upon, conditions that could potentially be violated under new leadership with different strategic priorities. As dawn broke over the Seattle skyline, I had the outline of a plan. Project Keystone, I named it, appropriate for what would either preserve the foundation of the company I'd built or become the cornerstone of something new. I wouldn't resign. In protest. I wouldn't start over somewhere else, abandoning the innovations I'd created and the team I'd assembled. I would fight, not out of wounded pride or sibling rivalry, but because Wilson Innovations as I had built it was worth fighting. For the 200-plus employees who depended on the company for their livelihoods deserved leadership that understood the technology they were developing. The healthcare partners who trusted us with critical diagnostic systems deserved continuity and expertise. My grandfather's legacy deserved better than to become a victim of family politics. By the time the sun had fully risen over Elliott Bay, I had made my decision. I showered, dressed in my usual business attire, charcoal suit, light blue shirt, no tie, and headed to the office. Not to clean out my desk or make a dramatic exit, but to begin implementing Project Keystone. The battle for Wilson Innovations had begun, and unlike my father and sister, I came prepared for war. I arrived at Wilson Innovations headquarters at 5:30 a.m., just as I had nearly every day for the past decade. Our modern glass building with its illuminated blue logo stood as a physical manifestation of how far we'd come under my leadership. A far cry from the dreary office park where I'd started this journey. "Morning, Mr. Wilson," called Jerry, the security guard who had been with us since the early days. "Thought you might take the day off after the big announcement." "Too much work to do, Jerry," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The MediMind rollout won't manage itself. As the elevator carried me to the executive floor, I mentally reviewed my priorities for the day. First, I needed to speak with my core team, the people who had been instrumental in our transformation and whose support would be crucial in the coming weeks. Second, I needed to reach out to our most significant healthcare partners to reassure them about continuity during the transition. And third, I needed to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with my father and sister. When the elevator doors opened, I was surprised to find Amir Patel, our chief technology officer, already waiting outside my office. Amir had been one of my first hires after joining Wilson Innovations, a brilliant developer I'd lured away from a major tech firm with the promise of building something meaningful rather than just profitable. "Didn't expect to see you here so early," I said, unlocking my office door. Amir followed me in, closing the door behind him. "I couldn't sleep after last night's announcement. Half the dev team is in panic mode, Jamie. 3 have already received calls from recruiters who were at the event." I set my bag down on my desk, unsurprised but concerned. Seattle's tech scene is tight-knit, news travels fast, and talent recruitment is ruthlessly opportunistic. Any hint of instability would put targets on our best people's backs. "What's the mood?" I asked, though I could guess the answer. "Confused, worried, angry on your behalf." Amir ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Everyone knows MediMind is your creation. Olivia has never even attended a technical briefing, much less contributed to product development. How is she supposed to lead client presentations on neural network implementations when she had to ask me last week what the difference is between AI and machine learning?" The question hung in the air, its obvious answer unspoken. She couldn't. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Chen, our head of product development. "Emergency meeting in your office? Brought coffee?" "Come up," I replied, then looked at Amir. "Let's hold off on further discussion until Rachel joins us." Within 15 minutes, my core team had assembled in my office. Amir, Rachel, Marcus Jones, our operations director, and Layla Washington, our chief data scientist. All wore expressions ranging from concern to outright indignation. "Is this some kind of joke?" Layla demanded without preamble. She waved her tablet displaying the company-wide email that had gone out last night after the announcement. "Olivia's appointment effective next month. You transitioning to Chief Technical Advisor, whatever that means. Please tell me this is an elaborate prank." "It's not a prank," I replied calmly, taking the coffee Rachel offered. "But it's also not the final chapter of this story." I opened my laptop and turned the screen to show them the document I'd been preparing since 3 a.m., Project Keystone. "What is this?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "A contingency plan. Or, more accurately, a series of contingencies depending on how certain conversations go in the coming days." I pulled up the relevant sections of the LLC agreement and intellectual property contracts, explaining the leverage points I'd identified during my night of research. Rachel studied the documents with growing interest. "So, according to the original LLC agreement, you're entitled to decision-making authority over MediMind and related products." "Yes, and since those products generate over 60% of our revenue, that's significant leverage." "What about the patents?" Amir asked. "I remember you insisted on some unusual language in those agreements." I nodded. "The company licenses patents listing me as primary inventor under specific governance conditions. Those conditions include maintaining the healthcare focus of our applications and particular quality control processes that only our current technical team is qualified to implement." Understanding dawned across their faces. Layla was the first to verbalize it. "So, if Olivia tries to pivot away from healthcare or replace key technical staff, she would potentially violate the licensing agreements," I confirmed, "which would mean the company loses rights to the core technology that drives MediMind." Marcus whistled softly. "That's one hell of a dead man's switch. Have you always been this paranoid? Or is it a recent development?" I couldn't help but smile slightly. "Let's call it prudent planning. I love this company too much not to protect it, even from my own family's poor decisions." "So what's the play here?" Amir asked, the question hanging heavy in the room. "Are you leaving to start a competitor? Taking the tech team with you?" "That's one possible outcome," I acknowledged. "But it's not my preferred scenario. Ideally, I'd like to see a leadership structure that reflects actual contributions and expertise, with Olivia focusing on areas where she might genuinely add value while I continue directing our core technology and healthcare partnerships." My phone buzzed again, a calendar invitation from Olivia for a strategic vision alignment meeting at 11 a.m., CC'd to the entire executive team. "Perfect timing," I said, showing them the invite. "Let me handle this meeting alone first. I need to understand exactly what Dad and Olivia are planning before we make any definitive moves." As my team filed out, each expressing their support in different ways, Layla's fierce, "We're with you whatever you decide." Rachel's practical, "I'll prepare impact assessments for different scenarios." Marcus's loyal, "Just give the word." I felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for their solidarity, responsibility for their careers, And beneath it all, a steely determination that had carried me through countless challenges over the past decade. This wouldn't be like the pivot to healthcare AI, or the development of MediMind, or the expansion into international markets. Those were business challenges with technical solutions. This was personal, familial, emotional, but no less deserving of strategic thinking and careful execution. I spent the next few hours reviewing our current projects, ensuring nothing critical would be disrupted by the leadership uncertainty. At 10:55, I made my way to the main conference room, the room where I had pitched MediMind to our first major client 4 years ago, where I had led countless product development meetings, where I had built the future of Wilson Innovations, one decision at a time. Olivia arrived 5 minutes late, dressed in an expensive designer suit that probably cost more than most of our developers made in a month. Dad followed behind her, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expression unreadable. No one else from the executive team had been invited, I noticed, a deviation from the calendar invitation. "Jamie," Olivia greeted me with forced cheerfulness. "I'm so excited about our new partnership. I've been working on some amazing ideas to take Wilson Innovations in bold new directions." I smiled politely, taking my usual seat at the conference table. I'd be interested to hear them. For the next 30 minutes, I listened as Olivia outlined a vision that made my blood run cold, pivoting away from healthcare AI to create consumer mobile applications, selling our proprietary algorithms to the highest bidder regardless of application, and modernizing our company culture with open floor plans and mandatory team-building retreats. Each proposal demonstrated a profound misunderstanding of our technology, our market position, and the specialized talent we had assembled. When she finally paused for breath, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since the announcement. "Olivia, what experience do you have with artificial intelligence development or healthcare technology implementation?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Well, I bring fresh eyes. Sometimes expertise can be limiting, don't you think? I see the big picture." Dad interjected, "Your sister has an excellent eye for trends. Her worldwide perspective will help us reach new markets." "Like the Chinese healthcare market?" I asked. "Where we're currently finalizing a $30 million contract that required 2 years of relationship building and navigating complex regulatory requirements?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Olivia will have you to guide her, of course. You'll stay on as technical advisor." And there it was, the demotion packaged as a consolation prize. The expectation that I would quietly step aside from leadership while continuing to provide the expertise necessary to keep the company functioning. Also, my sister could enjoy the title and compensation of a CEO role she was fundamentally unqualified to perform. "I see," I replied, my voice measured. "Before we discuss my role, I'd like to bring up Section 12.3 of the original LLC agreement." I slid copies of the LLC agreement across the table. My father's face darkened as he recognized the document, his fingers tensing almost imperceptibly as he picked it up. 10 years as his daughter and protege had taught me to read these micro-expressions: surprise, unease, the faintest hint of grudging respect. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "From the corporate archives. Section 12.3 is particularly interesting." I kept my tone conversational, as if discussing weather rather than launching a counter-offensive. It specifies that any family member who has worked in the business for at least 5 years and developed a product line generating more than 25% of annual revenue is entitled to proportional decision-making authority in their area of expertise. My father's jaw tightened. That agreement was superseded when we restructured the company in 2016. "Actually, it wasn't," I countered. "The restructuring addressed corporate governance but explicitly preserved the family succession provisions. I confirmed this with legal yesterday evening." Olivia looked between us, confusion evident. "What does this mean exactly?" "It means," I said calmly, That as the developer of products generating more than 60% of our revenue, I'm entitled to proportional decision-making authority in all matters related to product development, technical strategy, and client relationships for those products. Dad's expression hardened. You're threatening legal action against your own family? I'm proposing an alternative structure, I corrected, sliding another document across the table. Dual leadership. Olivia as CEO of business operations and strategy. Me as CEO of technology and product development. Both positions with equal authority in their domains, reporting to you as executive chairman during a transition period. The proposal was carefully crafted to offer a face-saving compromise while preserving my control over the aspects of Wilson Innovations that mattered most. Olivia could have her CEO title and focus on areas where her perspective might genuinely add value. I would maintain leadership over our core technology and client relationships. My father could retain oversight during a transition period, allowing him to feel his authority hadn't been completely undermined. Olivia looked relieved at this compromise, but Dad's expression darkened further. Impossible. A company needs one clear leader. This decision is final, Jamie. I stood, gathering my papers with deliberate calm. Then so is mine. I'll be exercising my rights under the patent licensing agreements effective immediately. You have 24 hours to consider the dual leadership structure before I call the board meeting. As I walked out, I heard Olivia ask Dad, "What patent agreements? What is he talking about?" I didn't wait to hear his answer. The first move had been made. The next would depend on my father's response. Back in my office, I found Amir waiting anxiously. How did it go? About as expected, I replied, setting down the documents. Dad rejected the dual leadership proposal. Outright. Now we wait to see if he reconsiders when legal reviews the patent implications. Amir shook his head. I still can't believe they're doing this. After everything you've built. It's not personal, I said, though the words felt hollow. Dad sees the company as a family legacy, not a modern business. In his mind, both his children should have a turn at leadership, regardless of qualifications. I glanced at my watch. Speaking of which, I need you to call an emergency technical leadership meeting for 2 p.m. Conference room B, not the main, boardroom. What should I tell people it's about? Contingency planning. While Amir arranged the meeting, I made 2 critical phone calls. The first was to Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, Chief Medical Officer at Northwest Medical Center, our first major client and still one of our most important partners. The second was to Lawrence Patel at Morgan Stanley, who had been quietly advising me on valuation metrics for Wilson Innovations' intellectual property portfolio. By 2 p.m., Conference Room B was filled with the technical leadership that formed the backbone of Wilson Innovations. 15 brilliant minds who had architected, built, and continuously improved our healthcare AI platforms. They represented the institutional knowledge that made our products exceptional, the specialized expertise that couldn't be replaced by generic management skills. Thank you all for coming on short notice, I began, closing the door. What I'm about to share is confidential, but you deserve to know the full situation. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the scenario. Olivia's appointment, my father's, rejection of the dual leadership proposal, and the potential futures that now lay before us. I didn't sugarcoat the implications or ask for blind loyalty. These were scientists and engineers. They deserved facts, not emotional appeals. Option 1, I concluded. My father reconsiders and accepts the dual leadership structure. Option 2, I leverage the patent licensing agreements to block any fundamental changes to our healthcare focus, essentially creating a stalemate until a better solution emerges. Option 3, I paused, ensuring I had everyone's attention. I form a new company focused exclusively on healthcare AI, taking our intellectual property and expertise with me. The room fell silent as the gravity of the third option sank in. It wasn't just a career decision, It was a potential exodus that would fundamentally reshape Wilson Innovations. Dr. Maya Gupta, our lead neural network architect, was the first to speak. If option 3 happens, would we maintain our current product direction? The diagnostic expansion for rare diseases? Absolutely, I confirmed. That would remain our core focus. What about existing client contracts? Asked Tom Keller, head of implementation. Would they transfer? That would depend on the specific legal outcomes, I admitted. But most of our major healthcare partners have already expressed concerns about the leadership transition. I believe many would follow the technical team and intellectual property rather than staying with the Wilson name alone. The questions continued: practical, technical, financial. Not a single person asked about titles or compensation, a testament to the culture we had built. These weren't corporate climbers. They were mission-driven innovators who believed in what we were creating. As the meeting concluded, I made one thing clear. I'm not asking for decisions today. This is information sharing, not recruitment. Whatever happens in the coming days, each of you needs to make the choice that's right for your own career and circumstances. Maya lingered after the others filed out. She had been with me almost from the beginning, turning theoretical AI concepts into functional diagnostic systems. You built this, Jamie, she said quietly. Not just the company or the technology, but this team. Whatever path forward you choose, I think you know where most of us stand. Her words carried both reassurance and responsibility. If I chose option 3, I wouldn't be starting over alone. But I would be responsible for the livelihoods and careers of dozens of people who trusted my leadership. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, I replied, though we both knew hope was not a strategy. The next 24 hours passed in a strange limbo of ordinary business operations overlaid with extraordinary tension. I attended scheduled meetings, reviewed development progress on MediMind 4.0, and spoke with international healthcare partners as if nothing had changed. Meanwhile, the countdown to my self-imposed deadline ticked inexorably forward. At 10 a.m., the following morning, exactly 24 hours after our confrontation, my office phone rang. It was my father's assistant, her voice carefully professional. Mr. Wilson would like to see you in his office immediately. The walk to my father's office felt longer than usual. I'd made this journey countless times over the past decade, bringing problems, solutions, triumphs, setbacks, always as the daughter seeking approval, the dedicated protege building his legacy. Today, I walked as an equal, perhaps even an adversary. My father wasn't alone. Olivia sat in one of the visitor chairs looking uncomfortable. More surprisingly, Harold Zimmerman, our company's longtime legal counsel, occupied the other chair. His presence confirmed that my father had taken the patent implications seriously enough to seek legal advice. Jamie, my father nodded toward the empty chair. Harold has been reviewing the documents you referenced yesterday. I sat, maintaining a neutral expression. And? Harold cleared his throat. I've examined both the original LLC agreement and the subsequent restructuring documents. While the situation isn't entirely clear-cut, there is legal merit to your position regarding decision-making authority for product lines you've developed. My father's expression tightened, but he remained silent as Harold continued. Additionally, the patent licensing agreements contain unusual governance conditions that could potentially be triggered by significant changes in product direction or technical leadership. Translation: I had them cornered, legally speaking. My father leaned forward, fingers steepled. I've reviewed your dual leadership proposal. While I maintain that a traditional single CEO structure would be preferable, I recognize the unique circumstances we face. It wasn't quite surrender, but it was movement. I waited, letting the silence stretch. I'm prepared to consider a modified version of your proposal, he finally continued. Olivia as CEO of Strategic Growth and Client Relations, You as CEO of Technology and Product Development, both reporting to me as Executive Chairman for a transition period of 18 months. It was almost exactly what I had proposed, with minor terminology adjustments to save face. The real question was whether this represented genuine acceptance or a temporary tactical retreat while he developed a counter-strategy. And after the transition period? I asked. The board would evaluate the effectiveness of the dual structure and make recommendations accordingly. I nodded slowly. I'd want that evaluation process clearly defined in writing, with objective performance metrics for both leadership positions. Of course, my father agreed, perhaps too quickly. Olivia had remained silent throughout this exchange, her expression fluctuating between relief and uncertainty. I turned to her directly. What are your thoughts on this structure, Olivia? It would mean focusing your efforts on market expansion and client experience rather than technical direction. She seemed surprised to be consulted. I think it could work well. My strengths have always been in people relationships and spotting emerging trends, not technical details. At least she recognized this limitation, a promising sign. I turned back to my father. I'll need to review the specific terms with my own legal counsel, I said, the message clear that I no longer considered Harold to be representing my interests. But in principle, this approach could address my concerns while respecting your desire for Olivia to take on leadership responsibilities. My father nodded, the barest hint of relief crossing his features. I'll have Harold draft the necessary documents for review. We should present a unified message to the board at tomorrow's meeting. Assuming the terms are acceptable, I agree, I said, standing to signal the end of the discussion. But to be perfectly clear, this isn't a negotiating tactic or temporary concession. The dual leadership structure is the only path forward that preserves both the company's technical foundation and our family relationships. As I left my father's office, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged. Option 3, the nuclear option of starting over, had never been my preferred outcome. It would have meant years of rebuilding, legal battles, and permanently fractured family ties. The dual leadership structure, while not ideal, offered a viable compromise that protected what mattered most: the innovative work we were doing and the team that made it possible. Back in my office, I called Lawrence Patel to put our contingency planning on hold, then gathered my executive team to share the tentative agreement. Their reactions ranged from cautious optimism to lingering skepticism. "Do you trust this?" Amir asked bluntly when the others had left. "Your father doesn't strike me as someone who easily accepts compromise." "Trust, but verify," I replied. The formal agreements will include specific protections and governance mechanisms. And frankly, Dad is nothing if not pragmatic. He recognizes that forcing me out would damage or destroy the company he spent his life building. And Olivia? Can you work with her? It was a fair question. Despite growing up in the same household, Olivia and I had never been particularly close. Different interests, different personalities, different life trajectories. Now we would be yoked together in business leadership. "I think so," I said after a moment's reflection. "Whatever her limitations in technical knowledge, she's intelligent and adaptable. And she seems to recognize the boundaries of her expertise, which is crucial." Amir didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. "Well, it's better than civil war. I'll let the technical team know we're likely staying put." The board meeting the following morning would normally be a routine quarterly review. Instead, it would formalize one of the most significant leadership transitions in Wilson Innovations history. I spent the evening reviewing the draft agreements Harold had prepared, suggesting modifications to strengthen the autonomy of my domain and ensure clear metrics for the eventual evaluation of the dual structure's effectiveness. By morning, we had reached acceptable terms. The board meeting would make it official, assuming the board approved. The Wilson Innovations Board consisted of 7 members: my father as chairman, 2 family friends who had provided initial investment, our CFO, and 3 independent directors with technology backgrounds who I had brought on during our expansion. Their approval wasn't guaranteed, particularly from the old family friends who might reflexively support my father's original plan. I arrived at the boardroom 30 minutes early to set up a demonstration of our newest healthcare AI module, a system designed to increase diagnostic accuracy for rare diseases by 40% over conventional methods. It wasn't just for show. It represented the future direction I envisioned for Wilson Innovations, a concrete example of what my continued leadership could deliver. Board members filtered in gradually, the atmosphere notably tense compared to our typically collegial meetings. My father and Olivia entered last, both dressed in formal business attire that signaled the gravity of the occasion. "Thank you all for coming," my father began once everyone was seated. "Today's primary agenda item is a significant leadership transition for Wilson Innovations. As you know, I recently announced Olivia would be taking over as CEO next month. However, after further discussion, we're proposing a modified structure that better reflects our company's unique characteristics." He outlined the dual leadership model, explaining how it would leverage both Olivia's and my distinct strengths. Several board members exchanged surprised glances. Clearly, they had expected either my father's original plan to be implemented, or perhaps my resignation in protest. The compromise caught them off guard. When my father finished, Martin Green, one of the family friends on the board, spoke up. "Robert, just last week you were adamant that a single CEO model was essential. What changed your mind?" My father glanced at me before responding. "Several factors. Jamie raised legitimate concerns about maintaining continuity in our healthcare AI development. Additionally, our legal counsel identified certain patent and governance considerations that support this approach." A diplomatic answer that avoided mentioning our near confrontation or my leveraging of the LLC agreement. Dr. Catherine Lin, one of the independent directors with a background in healthcare technology, studied the proposal with evident interest. "This actually makes considerable sense from a business perspective. Healthcare AI requires specialized expertise and established relationships. The dual structure ensures we maintain those while expanding into new markets." Several other board members nodded in agreement. "I'd like to hear from both Jamie and Olivia," said Green, still looking skeptical. "Do you two believe you can work effectively in this structure?" Olivia spoke first. "I believe this arrangement plays to both our strengths. Jamie has built an incredible technical foundation, while I can focus on market expansion and client experience, areas where my perspective might bring fresh opportunities." Her answer was diplomatic and self-aware, more so than I might have expected. Perhaps the reality of potentially leading a complex technology company had tempered her initial enthusiasm. When all eyes turned to me, I activated the display, screen showing our rare disease diagnostic module. This represents the future of Wilson Innovations, advanced AI systems that meaningfully improve healthcare outcomes. It's the culmination of years of focused development and deep understanding of both the technology and the healthcare environment. I navigated through several screens of the system, explaining key innovations. This work doesn't happen by accident. It requires specialized knowledge and continuity of vision. The dual leadership structure ensures that continuity while creating space for new growth initiatives. Looking directly at the board members, I continued. "Olivia and I bring different skills to the table. This structure acknowledges and leverages those differences rather than forcing an artificial choice between them." The demonstration seemed to resonate, particularly with the technically informed directors. After a brief discussion, my father called for a vote on the dual leadership proposal. It passed unanimously. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached to offer congratulations to both Olivia and me. The tension that had been building since the anniversary dinner began to dissipate, replaced by cautious optimism about the path forward. My father caught my eye as people were leaving and gave a slight nod, acknowledgement, if not quite approval. It was more than I expected, and in its way, a minor victory. Outside the boardroom, Olivia touched my arm lightly. Can we talk? Maybe coffee in the cafe downstairs? 10 minutes later, we sat across from each other at a small table in the building's ground floor cafe, away from the curious eyes of Wilson Innovations employees who would soon be hearing about the new leadership structure. I owe you an apology, Olivia began, surprising me. I knew Dad was planning to make me CEO, but I didn't understand what that really meant for the company. Or for you. Her candor was unexpected. What did you think it meant? She turned her coffee cup slowly. Honestly, I thought it was largely ceremonial. Dad talked about me being the face of the company, while you handled the technical side. It sounded like I'd be doing the networking and public appearances while you'd continue running everything important behind the scenes. The naivete of this perspective was almost stunning. That's not how CEO positions work, Olivia. It's ultimate decision-making authority, not a PR role. I realize that now, she admitted. When Dad showed me the actual responsibilities and compensation package, I got excited about the opportunity. But these past few days have been educational. I've seen how complex this business really is, how much specialized knowledge is required. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm not unqualified for leadership, Jamie. I've managed large-scale photography projects internationally, navigated complex logistics and team dynamics. But I am unqualified to make decisions about neural network implementations or healthcare regulations. The dual structure makes sense. Her self-awareness was refreshing and suggested that working together might be more feasible than I had initially thought. For what it's worth, she continued, I do think I can bring value in certain areas: international market development, client experience design, brand positioning. These are things I understand deeply from my work, and maybe some fresh perspective on company culture. I nodded slowly. Those are legitimate contributions. The key is respecting domain boundaries. You lead where your expertise applies, I lead where mine does. Partners? She extended her hand across the table. I hesitated only briefly before shaking it. Partners, though we have a lot of details to work out before this becomes operational. 1 month to figure it out, she said with a smile that reminded me of our childhood. Olivia always had been the optimist between us. But first, we need to announce this to the company. People are confused and worried after Dad's original announcement. She was right. The rumor mill had undoubtedly been working overtime since the anniversary dinner. A clear, unified message about the new leadership structure was essential to stabilize the organization. All hands meeting tomorrow morning, I suggested. We'll present the dual structure together, emphasizing continuity in our core business while highlighting opportunities for growth in new areas. Olivia nodded enthusiastically. I'll work on talking points tonight and send them over for your review. As we walked back to the elevator, I felt cautiously optimistic. The dual leadership model was unprecedented in Wilson Innovations' history and would undoubtedly present challenges. But the alternative, walking away from the company I had built or watching it potentially disintegrate under inexperienced leadership, would have been far worse. That evening, I called Dr. Elizabeth Morgan at Northwest Medical Center to share the news. As our first major client and a trusted advisor, her perspective mattered. Dual CEOs? She said, sounding intrigued rather than concerned. That's unusual in the tech world, but actually quite common in healthcare. Many hospital systems have a medical director and an administrative CEO working in partnership. Her comparison was apt and reassuring. The key will be clear role definition and communication, I acknowledged. And trust, Elizabeth added. You'll need to trust your sister's judgment in her domain, just as she needs to trust yours. Trust had never been Wilson Innovations' strong suit. My father had always operated on a need-to-know basis with tight control over information flow. Building a more collaborative leadership culture would require fundamental changes in how we operated. Change is coming to Wilson Innovations one way or another, I told Elizabeth. Better to shape it intentionally than resist it futilely. After we hung up, I spent several hours reviewing Olivia's draft talking points for the all-hands meeting. They were surprisingly good, clear, authentic, and appropriately balanced between acknowledging concerns and painting an optimistic future vision. Her communications background was evident in the narrative structure and emphasis on human elements of the transition. I made only minor edits before sending it back with a note. Strong draft. Looking forward to presenting this together tomorrow. It was a small gesture of collegiality, but it felt significant. Perhaps the first step toward a genuine partnership rather than a reluctant compromise. The following morning, the company auditorium filled quickly. Every employee who could be spared from essential operations had gathered, the atmosphere electric with anticipation and uncertainty. News of yesterday's board meeting had leaked, but details remained scarce, fueling speculation. My father opened the meeting, his authoritative presence commanding immediate attention. He briefly recapped the anniversary announcement, then pivoted to the new development. After thoughtful discussion with both Jamie and Olivia, and with unanimous board approval, we're implementing a dual leadership structure that better serves Wilson Innovations' complex needs. He outlined the basic framework, then introduced Olivia and me as co-leaders who will guide this company into its next chapter of growth and innovation. Olivia spoke next, her natural charisma evident as she connected with the audience. She acknowledged the initial confusion caused by the original announcement and her own learning curve regarding our healthcare AI focus. What became abundantly clear through discussions with Jamie and the board is that Wilson Innovations' success comes from complementary strengths, technical excellence and innovation paired with market understanding and client relationships. The dual leadership structure formalized yesterday doesn't divide the company. It amplifies these complementary strengths. She outlined her vision for expanding our market presence while respecting the healthcare foundation that had made us successful. When she introduced me, the handoff felt natural, not forced. I stepped to the podium, looking out at the faces of people who had built Wilson Innovations alongside me, from veteran engineers who had weathered the early pivots to recent graduates attracted by our cutting-edge AI work. 10 years ago, I joined a struggling IT consultancy with 20 employees and an uncertain future. Today, we stand as a $100 million healthcare AI leader with technologies that meaningfully improve patient outcomes across the globe. That transformation didn't happen by accident or individual effort. It happened through collective expertise, dedication, and innovation. I gestured toward the screen behind me, which displayed our product roadmap for the coming year. This remains our North Star, advancing diagnostic capabilities, expanding clinical applications, and deepening our healthcare partnerships. The dual leadership structure ensures continuity in these core initiatives, while creating space for strategic growth in complementary directions. As the presentation concluded and employees began asking questions, I noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy, from anxiety to cautious optimism. The clear delineation of responsibilities seemed to reassure technical staff concerned about Olivia's inexperience with AI, while administrative employees appreciated the emphasis on growth and new opportunities. By meeting's end, the immediate crisis had passed. Wilson Innovations would continue its healthcare AI focus under my technical leadership, while Olivia would explore growth opportunities that leveraged our core technologies in new ways. It wasn't the outcome I had expected when I first heard my father's announcement at the anniversary dinner, but it might ultimately prove stronger than either his original plan or my preferred alternative. As employees filed out, my father approached, his expression uncharacteristically reflective. "You handled that well," he said, nodding toward the departing crowd. "Both of you did." Coming from him, this qualified as effusive praise. "The dual structure can work," I replied, "if we all commit to making it work." He studied me for a moment, as if seeing something new. "You know, your grandfather, my father, always said leadership isn't about having all the answers yourself. It's about creating the conditions where the best answers can emerge. It was perhaps the first time he had ever compared me favorably to his father, the company's co-founder and his personal hero. Maybe that's what we've done here, he continued, glancing between Olivia and me. Created conditions for better answers than any one of us would have reached alone. Whether he truly believed this or was simply making peace with the compromise remained unclear. But as we walked out of the auditorium together, father, son, and daughter, I felt something shift in our family dynamic. Not reconciliation exactly, but perhaps the beginning of mutual respect among equals rather than the hierarchical relationship that had defined us for decades. The real test would come in the implementation, in the 1,000 daily decisions that would either reinforce or undermine the dual leadership model. But for now, we had averted disaster and charted a path forward that preserved both the company I had built and the family relationships that, despite everything, still mattered. The battle for Wilson Innovations had ended not in victory or defeat, but in transformation, for the company, for our family, and perhaps most significantly, for me. I had stood my ground when it mattered most, neither surrendering my life's work nor destroying the family business in the process. Whatever came next, that knowledge would remain a foundation I could build upon. 3 months after the dual leadership structure was implemented, I sat in what was now officially my office, no longer the generically titled VP of Technology space, but the clearly designated CEO of Technology and Product Development. Suite. The physical change was minor, just updated signage and some rearranged furniture, but it symbolized a significant shift in Wilson Innovations' governance. The transition hadn't been seamless. Decades of single-leader operations had created ingrained habits that resisted change. Some employees struggled to understand which CEO to approach with particular issues. A few executive team members attempted to play Olivia and me against each other, presenting different versions of the same proposal to whoever they thought more likely to approve. We'd addressed these challenges systematically, creating clear decision matrices and implementing joint executive reviews for cross-domain initiatives. I was reviewing the latest metrics for our rare disease diagnostic module when Amir knocked on my open door, tablet in hand. Got a minute? I think you'll want to see this? He placed the tablet in front of me, displaying market research on emerging healthcare technology trends. Wilson Innovations was now listed among the top 5 healthcare AI companies globally, alongside firms 10 times our size. This is from Forrester's annual Healthcare Tech Report, Amir said, unable to hide his pride. They specifically cite our innovative dual leadership model that combines deep technical expertise with creative market approaches as a competitive advantage. I scanned the analysis, a sense of validation warming my chest. The arrangement that had begun as a defensive measure to protect what I'd built was now being recognized as a strategic strength. Perhaps my father's accidental wisdom had exceeded his intentions. There's more, Amir continued, swiping to another screen. NYU Medical Center is interested in implementing MediMind for their oncology department. Their CTO reached out directly, said he'd heard about our rare disease module from Elizabeth at Northwest. This was significant. NYU represented a prestigious, potential client that would further validate our approach in academic medical centers. Set up an initial call for next week. I'll want the full technical team available. Already scheduled for Tuesday at 10. Olivia suggested we might want to work with their PR team on a joint announcement if things progress. Apparently NYU's healthcare innovations get solid media coverage. I nodded, appreciating both the initiative and the collaborative approach. These small instances of Olivia and me working in complementary ways rather than at cross purposes had become increasingly common over the past 3 months. How's the North Star Health implementation going? I asked, referring to our largest client deployment to date. On schedule and under budget, Amir replied. Their chief medical officer sent over preliminary results from the first department. Rollout. Diagnostic accuracy improved by 28% for complex cases, and physician satisfaction scores are surprisingly high for a new system implementation. This was the work that mattered, not titles or office politics, but creating technology that meaningfully improved healthcare outcomes. Whatever complications the dual leadership structure created, it had preserved my ability to drive this core mission forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Need your input on Singapore opportunity. Lunch? Another unexpected development of the past 3 months. Regular working lunches with my sister. These informal sessions had proven surprisingly productive, allowing us to align on strategic direction without the formality of executive meetings. Lunch with Olivia at 12:30, I told Amir. Let's reconvene at 2 to review the NYU preparation. 40 minutes later, I met Olivia at Elliott's, a small bistro near our office that had become our unofficial meeting spot. She was already seated at our usual corner table, laptop open, and several documents spread before her. The Singapore Health Ministry reached out, she began without preamble as I sat down. They're exploring AI diagnostic systems for their public hospitals and heard about our rare disease module from the WHO conference last month. I raised an eyebrow, impressed. The World Health Organization conference had been Olivia's idea, a venue I would have considered too policy-focused rather than technology-oriented. Clearly, she'd made valuable connections. They're particularly interested in adapting the system for Southeast Asian genetic profiles, she continued. Their population has certain rare disease patterns that differ from our primarily Western datasets. She slid a preliminary proposal across the table. The opportunity was substantial, potentially a $40 million contract if expanded across their hospital network. But it would require significant customization of our algorithms and likely an on-the-ground presence in Singapore. This could be an excellent anchor client for Asia-Pacific expansion, I noted, scanning the details. The technical challenges are significant but solvable. We'd need to establish a dedicated development team with expertise in genetic markers specific to Southeast Asian populations. Olivia nodded. I figured as much. I've drafted 2 potential approaches. She turned her laptop toward me. Option 1 is a conservative entry, remote implementation with quarterly on-site visits. Option 2 is more aggressive, establishing a Singapore office with local technical and support staff, using this contract as the foundation for regional growth. The old Wilson Innovations under my father's leadership would have automatically chosen the conservative approach. Risk mitigation had been his primary strategic lens. But I found myself drawn to the bolder vision, particularly given Olivia's evident preparation. You're leaning toward option 2, I observed. She smiled slightly. That obvious? You've already researched office space costs and local hiring regulations, I pointed out, noting the tabs open on her browser. Not something you'd do for a contingency plan. Singapore's positioning itself as Asia's healthcare innovation hub, she explained. Their government actively supports technology firms entering the market with tax incentives and streamlined regulatory processes. More importantly, it gives us access to a different patient demographic for training our algorithms. Her analysis was sound. The technical diversity would strengthen our AI models, making them more globally applicable. And having a physical presence would open doors throughout the region that would remain closed to remote operators. Option 2 has my support, I said. But we'll need to carefully consider the technical leadership for the Singapore office. Our algorithms aren't plug and play. They require deep understanding of the underlying architectural decisions. I was thinking Maya might be ideal, Olivia suggested. She mentioned wanting international experience during our last one-on-one. I paused, surprised. Maya Gupta was indeed perfect for the role. Brilliant, adaptable, and ready for increased responsibility. But she was also one of our most valuable technical leaders, someone I would have been reluctant to relocate. You've been having one-on-ones? With the technical team? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Olivia looked momentarily uncertain. Just informally. I've been meeting with different team members for coffee, trying to understand their perspectives and career aspirations. Should I not have? I considered this. Under the old structure, such initiative might have felt like territorial encroachment. Under our dual leadership model, it represented valuable cross-pollination. No, it's a good idea, I said. Maya would be excellent for Singapore, assuming she's interested. We should discuss it with her together. Relief crossed Olivia's features. I was worried you might see it as overstepping. 3 months ago I might have, I admitted. But I've seen how your different perspective benefits the company. The WHO conference connections alone proved that. Our conversation shifted to implementation details, timeline, budget, staffing. By the time our lunch concluded, we had outlined a comprehensive approach to the Singapore opportunity that incorporated both technical excellence and strategic market positioning. It was a true synthesis of our complementary strengths, neither of us dominating the decision. As we walked back to the office, Olivia asked, "Have you spoken with Dad lately? He's been unusually quiet the past few weeks." Our father had gradually reduced his involvement in day-to-day operations, attending the required executive chairman meetings but offering minimal input. This evolution matched our formal agreement, but the speed of his disengagement had surprised us both. I had coffee with him last Thursday, I replied. He mentioned playing more golf and considering joining the board of Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation. Olivia looked thoughtful. He seems to be adapting to reduced involvement better than I expected. I think seeing the company continue to thrive has reassured him, I suggested. The Forrester ranking and North Star results validate the dual leadership approach in ways even he can't dismiss. Maybe, Olivia nodded. Though knowing Dad, he probably tells himself it was his plan all along. We shared a knowing smile at this accurate assessment of our father's revisionist tendencies. It was a small moment of sibling connection that would have been unimaginable 3 months earlier. Back at the office, I found Maya waiting outside my door. Amir mentioned you wanted to discuss the NYU preparation, she began, then paused. But you have a different look on your face. What's happening? How would you feel about Singapore? I asked. Her eyes widened. Singapore? We have a client there? I spent the next hour explaining the Singapore Health Ministry opportunity to Maya, watching her initial surprise transform into genuine excitement. As our lead neural network architect, she immediately grasped both the technical challenges and extraordinary potential of adapting our algorithms for Southeast Asian genetic profiles. This could revolutionize our entire approach, she said, eyes bright with possibilities. Most AI diagnostic systems are trained predominantly on Western populations. Building models that perform equally well across diverse genetic backgrounds would be a major advancement for the field, not just for Wilson Innovations. Her enthusiasm confirmed what I'd suspected. This was the perfect role for her next professional chapter. It offered technical complexity, leadership opportunity, and meaningful impact. If we move forward, would you be interested in heading the technical implementation? I asked. It would mean relocating to Singapore for at least a year, possibly longer if we expand regionally. Maya didn't hesitate. Absolutely. My partner has been talking about international experience anyway. He works remotely for his design firm, so location is flexible. She paused, then added with characteristic directness, I'm surprised, though. I would have expected you to send someone more expendable. I'm leading 3 critical initiatives here. Which is precisely why you're the right person, I explained. This isn't a peripheral project. It's potentially the foundation of our entire Asia-Pacific strategy. We need our strongest technical leadership. I smiled slightly. Besides, you've been saying for months that the next generation of team leads needs more autonomy. This forces my hand on that front. Olivia suggested this, didn't she? Maya asked, surprising me with her perception. We discussed it together, I acknowledged. How did you know? The international expansion has her fingerprints all over it, but choosing me specifically, that feels like her. She's been asking really insightful questions about team development during our coffee meetings. I made a mental note to better appreciate Olivia's growing understanding of our organizational dynamics. Her people skills were proving valuable, in ways I hadn't anticipated. We'll need a formal proposal for the board, I said, redirecting to practical matters. Can you pull together preliminary technical requirements and staffing projections by Friday? Maya nodded, already making notes on her tablet. I'll work with Amir on the implementation timeline, and I should probably connect with Olivia about the logistical aspects. As she left, I reflected on how seamlessly she had mentioned collaborating with both my technical team and Olivia. 3 months ago, those would have been separate conversations with an implicit organizational divide. Now the boundaries were blurring in productive ways. The following weeks passed in a flurry of activity around both the Singapore initiative and our domestic expansion. The board unanimously approved our Asia-Pacific strategy, impressed by the comprehensive proposal that seamlessly integrated technical innovation and market positioning. My father, in his executive chairman role, had offered only minor suggestions before giving his blessing, another sign of his evolving relationship with the company he had founded. 6 months into the dual leadership structure, Wilson Innovations was not merely surviving the transition, but thriving. Revenue projections showed a 22% increase over the previous year. Employee retention had stabilized after an initial period of uncertainty. Most importantly, our core healthcare AI development continued to advance rapidly, with MediMind 4.0 receiving FDA approval 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The defining moment came unexpectedly during a client presentation to NYU Medical Center. Traditionally, I would have led these technical discussions while someone from business development handled relationship aspects. Instead, Olivia and I had developed a tag-team approach that leveraged our complementary strengths. As we stood before NYU's medical leadership team, Olivia opened with a compelling vision of healthcare transformed by compassionate technology, connecting emotionally with the physicians in a way my technically focused presentations never had. When it came time for the detailed explanation of how our neural networks processed diagnostic information, she smoothly transitioned to me. And to explain how we're making this vision a reality, let me introduce our CEO of Technology and Product Development, the brilliant mind behind our AI architecture, my sister Jamie Wilson. The handoff was seamless, natural, and remarkably effective. By the presentation's end, NYU's chief medical officer was leaning forward eagerly, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines. Most tech companies sell us on features, he said afterward. You showed us transformation. That's rare. Later that evening, as we celebrated the successful presentation over dinner, Olivia raised her glass. To complementary strengths, turns out we make a better team than either of us could have imagined. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a genuine warmth that transcended our professional arrangement. The data supports your hypothesis, I replied in typical fashion, making her laugh. Always the scientist, she teased. Can't you just say we work well together? We work exceptionally well together, I amended. Better than I anticipated. Her expression grew more serious. I owe you an apology, Jamie. When Dad first proposed making me CEO, I didn't fully understand what you'd built, or how complex this business really is. I was flattered by the opportunity without appreciating the responsibility. Her candor deserved reciprocal honesty. And I underestimated what you could bring to Wilson Innovations. Your global perspective and people skills have opened doors I wouldn't have even approached. Not to mention my Instagram follower count, she added with a self-deprecating smile, referencing my initial dismissive thoughts about her social media presence. Which, as it turns out, has legitimate business development applications, I acknowledged. Her healthcare innovation posts had attracted attention from unexpected quarters, including the WHO officials who had ultimately connected us with Singapore's health ministry. After dinner, walking back to our hotel through Manhattan's vibrant streets, Olivia asked a question that caught me off guard. "Are you happy, Jamie?" The question was so simple yet so profound that it momentarily stalled my analytical mind. Was I happy? Before the dual leadership arrangement, I would have immediately conflated professional achievement with personal fulfillment, pointing to Wilson Innovation's growth metrics as proof of happiness. But something had shifted in these 6 months. With Olivia sharing the leadership burden, I had gradually reclaimed parts of myself that had been subsumed by work. I'd started rock climbing again on weekends. I'd reconnected with Stanford friends I'd neglected for years. I'd even begun tentatively dating Dr. Lauren Chen, a computational neuroscientist I'd met at a healthcare AI conference. "I'm getting there," I answered truthfully. For years, Wilson Innovations consumed every aspect of my life. It was me, in a fundamental way. Now there's space for something more. I glanced at her curiously. "What about you? Is this what you wanted when you came back to Seattle?" She laughed, softly. "Not even close. I came back because I was tired of living out of suitcases, looking for roots after years of constant movement. I thought the director position Dad created would be simple, part-time even, leaving me space to pursue photography and maybe start a family." She shook her head ruefully. "Instead, I'm co-leading a tech company and opening an office in Singapore." "Regrets?" I asked. "Surprisingly, no. This challenge is exhilarating, using different skills than photography, but equally creative in its way." She smiled. "Plus, I get to finally know my workaholic sister after all these years." The sentiment touched me more deeply than I expected. Throughout our childhood and early adulthood, Olivia and I had existed in parallel universes, cordial but distant, with fundamentally different interests and life trajectories. The dual leadership structure had forced a connection that might never have developed otherwise. "Dad called me yesterday," Olivia continued as we waited at a crosswalk. "He's ready to step down as executive chairman, ahead of schedule." This was unexpected. Our agreement had specified an 18-month transition period, with my father gradually reducing his involvement. We were only 6 months in. "Did he say why?" I asked. "Apparently the hospital foundation board is demanding more of his time. But honestly, I think he sees that we're doing fine without his oversight." She hesitated, then added, "He actually said he was proud of us, both of us." Coming from our father, a man who dispensed praise with eyedropper precision, this was extraordinary. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Validation, certainly, but also a wistful recognition that his approval meant less to me now than it once had. My sense of self-worth had gradually detached from his judgment, a healthier psychological state I hadn't fully appreciated until this moment. "The board will need to formally approve his early departure," I noted, mentally calculating. "The governance implications. Always practical," Olivia chided gently. "Can't you just enjoy the moment of paternal approval?" I smiled slightly. "I'm enjoying it in my own way, by ensuring our leadership structure remains stable." She rolled her eyes but didn't press the point. After a moment's comfortable silence, she asked, "So what happens after he steps down? Do we maintain the dual CEO arrangement indefinitely?" It was a legitimate question about our long-term governance. The dual structure had been designed partly as a compromise, partly as a transition mechanism. Was it sustainable as a permanent arrangement? "The data suggests it's working exceptionally well," I said, falling back on empirical evidence. "Our growth metrics, employee satisfaction scores, and innovation pipeline are all at record levels. From a purely business perspective, there's no reason to change what's working." "But?" Olivia prompted, sensing my hesitation. "But dual leadership is inherently complex. It requires constant communication, mutual respect, and aligned values. We happen to work well together, but institutional investors might question the sustainability. She nodded thoughtfully. So what's the alternative? Revert to a traditional single CEO model? That puts us right back where we started. Choosing between us. Not necessarily, I replied. By now, our respective domains are well established. We could formalize those permanently. You, as CEO of Wilson Global, focusing on international expansion and business development. Me, as CEO of Wilson Healthcare, focusing on our core AI technology and domestic healthcare partnerships. Olivia considered this. 2 distinct business units under a holding company structure? It's one possibility, I confirmed. We'd maintain the autonomy we both value while creating cleaner governance for potential investors. You're thinking about taking the company public, she realized, eyes widening slightly. I nodded. It's worth considering. Our valuation has nearly doubled in 6 months. Healthcare AI is attracting premium multiples, and an IPO would provide liquidity for early investors, including Dad. The conversation continued as we reached our hotel, diving into the implications of various corporate structures and potential market timing. It was the kind of strategic discussion that would have been unimaginable a year earlier, both in its collaborative nature and in Olivia's sophisticated grasp of business considerations that had once been entirely outside her experience. Next morning, as our flight back to Seattle took off, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation of the past 6 months, not just in Wilson Innovations' corporate structure, but in my relationship with my sister and my own sense of identity. The crisis that had begun with my father's announcement had ultimately strengthened both the company and our family. Dad had found purpose beyond controlling the business he had founded. Olivia had discovered leadership capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. And I had learned that holding on didn't always mean controlling, that sharing leadership didn't necessarily dilute it, but could actually amplify it in unexpected ways. As our plane banked west toward home, I opened my laptop to review the Singapore implementation plan. Maya had done exceptional work developing technical requirements tailored to Southeast Asian healthcare systems. The project would challenge our capabilities, but in productive ways that would ultimately strengthen our core technologies. Beside me, Olivia was sketching ideas for the new office space, creating an environment that would blend Western innovation practices with Asian collaborative traditions. Looking at our work side by side, her creative design elements and my technical specifications, I saw a perfect metaphor for what we had built together. Not a compromise or a temporary solution, but a genuine integration of complementary strengths that produced something neither of us could have created alone. 1 year to the day after my father's shocking announcement at the anniversary dinner, Wilson Innovations held another celebration at the Grand Peninsula Hotel. The occasion was different this time, marking the successful launch of our Singapore operation and the formal announcement of our corporate restructuring into Wilson Healthcare and Wilson Global, twin companies under the Wilson Innovations holding umbrella. The room was filled with employees, healthcare partners, and investors. Many of the same people who had witnessed my public demotion a year earlier. Now they gathered to celebrate our most successful year in company history. $150 million in revenue, international expansion, and a valuation approaching $500 million according to our latest funding round. I stood at the podium, surveying the gathering with a sense of quiet pride. 1 year ago, Wilson Innovations embarked on a significant transition, one that challenged us to rethink how we operate, how we lead, and how we grow. That transition taught us something valuable. That true strength comes not from rigid adherence to tradition, but from recognizing and leveraging diverse talents. I gestured toward Olivia, who stood at the side of the stage waiting for her part in the presentation. The dual leadership model we implemented wasn't just a compromise or a temporary measure. It became the foundation for extraordinary growth and innovation. allowing each of us to focus on our core strengths while creating something greater than the sum of its parts. As I introduced Olivia to discuss our international expansion strategy, I caught my father's eye in the audience. He sat beside my mother, looking more relaxed than I could remember, his silver hair slightly longer than his once regulation. Corporate cut. His expression one of genuine pride rather than critical assessment. When he nodded slightly in acknowledgement, I felt a sense of completion. Not because his approval still defined my worth, but because it represented healing in a relationship that had once seemed irreparably damaged. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, I found myself on the hotel's outdoor terrace overlooking Elliott Bay. The Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky, the Wilson Innovations logo visible atop our downtown headquarters. "Penny for your thoughts?" Lauren's voice pulled me from my reverie. Dr. Lauren Chen had moved from occasional date to significant relationship over the past 6 months, her brilliant mind and quiet confidence providing a counterpoint to my sometimes too analytical approach to life. "Just reflecting on how much has changed in a year," I replied, taking her hand. "From crisis to opportunity." "Your speech was good," she said, "though you left out the part where you nearly went nuclear and started a competing company." I laughed, softly. "Some details aren't meant for public consumption." "Fair enough, though I'm glad you didn't go that route. The Wilson siblings are much more interesting together than apart." Her observation was insightful as always. Together, Olivia and I had created something neither of us could have built independently. My technical vision and her global perspective had proven complementary in ways no one, least of all our father, could have predicted. Lauren glanced at her watch. "We should head back in soon. The formal announcement is in 20 minutes. The announcement she referenced was significant. Our board had unanimously approved a 2-year roadmap toward an initial public offering, with the dual company structure providing clean governance and focused investment theses for public markets. I would remain CEO of Wilson Healthcare. Olivia would lead Wilson Global, and our father would transition to Chairman Emeritus, an honorary title that acknowledged his founding role while formalizing his departure from operational oversight. As we turned to rejoin the celebration, I spotted Olivia across the terrace, deep in conversation with our Singapore team members who had flown in for the event. Her animated gestures and their engaged expressions reflected the genuine connection she had built with our international operations, relationships that transcended business transactions to create true cultural bridges. When she caught my eye and smiled, I felt a surge of gratitude for the crisis that had ultimately led to this transformation. What had begun as a fight for recognition had evolved into something more meaningful, a partnership built on mutual respect, a family reconciliation forged through professional collaboration, and a business model that honored both tradition and innovation. 5 years have passed since that pivotal moment when my father announced my sister would take over the company I had built. Wilson Innovations has now completed its successful IPO, with Wilson Healthcare and Wilson Global trading as separate public companies under the Wilson Innovations holding structure. Our combined market capitalization exceeds $2 billion, with operations spanning North America, Europe, and Asia. The healthcare AI platforms I developed have expanded beyond diagnostics into treatment optimization and preventative care, with MediMind systems now deployed in over 500 medical facilities worldwide. Olivia's international vision has created a global footprint that would have been unimaginable under our father's conservative leadership, with regional innovation hubs adapting our core technologies to local healthcare needs and cultural contexts. My father, now fully retired, divides his time between the Hospital Foundation Board and mentoring young entrepreneurs, finding purpose in sharing wisdom rather than exercising control. In a surprising development, my mother returned to her long-abandoned interest in architectural design, leading the creation of healing-oriented spaces in pediatric care facilities, a talent none of us had fully appreciated during her years as a corporate wife. Olivia has thrived as a global business leader, her natural charisma and cultural adaptability opening doors that would have remained closed to my more technical approach. She recently married a Singaporean healthcare executive she met during our expansion, their cross-cultural relationship mirroring the bridges she's built professionally. As for me, I've found balance I never thought possible. Wilson Healthcare remains my primary professional focus, but it no longer consumes every waking moment. Lauren and I married 3 years ago, blending our mutual passion for healthcare technology with shared interests in rock climbing, international travel, and philosophical debates about the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. Our first child is due next month, a daughter who will grow up understanding that family legacy comes in many forms, not all of them defined by traditional roles or expectations. Looking back on this journey, certain lessons stand out with crystal clarity, know your worth. I didn't fight for control of Wilson Innovations because of wounded pride or sibling rivalry. I fought because I had objectively built something valuable, something worth protecting. Recognizing your true contributions isn't arrogance, it's clarity. Prepare before you need to. Understanding our company's legal foundation, ownership structure, and intellectual property agreements wasn't a reaction to crisis, but part of my ongoing stewardship. The original LLC agreement and patent licensing conditions provided leverage precisely because I had paid attention to details others considered inconsequential. Find allies based on merit. Throughout this story, people like Amir, Maya, and our independent board members supported me not out of personal loyalty, but because they recognized demonstrated capability. Values-based alliances outlast personality-based ones every time. Seek solutions, not victories. The dual leadership model ultimately benefited everyone: the company, our clients, our employees, and yes, our family. Had I insisted on complete control or walked away entirely, none of us would have achieved what we have today. Embrace unexpected outcomes. The crisis that began with my father's announcement led to a corporate structure and family dynamic stronger than anyone could have envisioned. Sometimes the path forward isn't about fighting harder for your original goal, but recognizing when an unexpected alternative offers greater possibilities. And finally, understand that sometimes the most important leadership quality isn't technical expertise or strategic vision, though both matter deeply. Sometimes it's simply the courage to stand up and say, I built this, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away. Not because of tradition, not because of family expectations, but because I am genuinely the right person to lead it forward. Wilson Innovations continues to evolve, not as a monument to any individual, but as a living enterprise that honors contribution above all else. The company my father founded, that I transformed, and that Olivia helped expand globally stands as testament to what becomes possible when merit and vision replace tradition and entitlement as guiding principles. That is the legacy I'm most proud to have protected and helped build, not just for myself, but for everyone whose lives are touched by the healthcare technologies we create, and for the daughter who will soon enter a world where her opportunities are limited only by her talents and determination, never by outdated notions of who should lead and why. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown Seattle apartment, illuminating the architectural models scattered across my dining table. 6 months had passed since the board approved our dual leadership structure, transforming Wilson Innovations in ways none of us had anticipated. I sipped my coffee, examining the 3D renderings of our proposed Singapore office. Sleek, modern designs that seamlessly integrated Western workspace concepts with Asian collaborative elements. The office would serve as our launchpad into healthcare markets across Southeast Asia, an ambitious expansion that had once seemed impossible under my father's risk-averse leadership. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Final team interviews. Complete. Found an incredible ML specialist from National University of Singapore. Can we expedite her visa process? I smiled, thinking of how thoroughly Maya had embraced her role leading our Singapore technical operations. When we'd first discussed the position, I'd worried about losing her expertise from our Seattle headquarters. Instead, she had become our bridge between cultures, translating our healthcare AI approaches to meet distinctly different patient populations and medical systems. Her weekly video updates showed a woman transformed, energized by the challenge, thriving in the cross-cultural complexity. Before I could respond, another message arrived, this one from Olivia. Singapore Ministry of Health requesting meeting next Tuesday. They've seen preliminary results from our pilot and want to discuss nationwide implementation. Can you join remotely? The nationwide implementation would represent a $40 million contract, our largest single deal to date, and a validation of our international strategy. More importantly, it would demonstrate the efficacy of our diagnostic AI across genetically diverse populations, addressing one of healthcare AI's most persistent challenges. As I texted confirmations to both Maya and Olivia, I reflected on the extraordinary evolution of our company since that fateful night at the Grand Peninsula Hotel. Revenue had increased by 32% in just 6 months. Our technical team had grown to include specialists in diverse genetic markers and region-specific disease patterns. Most surprisingly, employee satisfaction scores had reached an all-time high under the dual leadership model that many had initially viewed with skepticism. My phone rang, Amir calling, unusually early for him. "Sorry to bother you before office hours," he began. "But there's something you should see. Check your email." I opened my laptop to find a message from Amir with the subject line, Forrester Healthcare Tech Report, page 14. Scanning quickly to the referenced page, I found Wilson Innovations prominently featured in their analysis of emerging industry leaders. Wilson Innovations represents a fascinating case study in adaptive corporate governance. Their innovative dual CEO model, splitting technical leadership and market development between specialized executives, has yielded remarkable results in both domestic innovation and international expansion. While unconventional, this approach has positioned them to compete effectively against much larger competitors by maintaining technical depth while rapidly entering new markets. The external validation was gratifying, but more significant was the framing. What had begun as a defensive compromise to protect what I'd built was now being recognized as a strategic advantage. Perhaps my father's instinct to bring Olivia into leadership, though poorly executed, had contained a kernel of genuine insight. An hour later, I walked into Wilson Innovations headquarters, nodding to the security guard who had witnessed my arrival at dawn nearly every day for the past decade. Today, however, I had arrived at a civilized 8 a.m. rather than my usual 5:30, another small but meaningful change in my gradually rebalancing life. "Morning, Jamie," called Rachel, our head of product development, as I passed her office. "Got a minute to discuss the NYU implementation?" NYU Medical Center had become our most prestigious domestic client, implementing our rare disease diagnostic module across their specialty departments. Their published results, showing a 37% improvement in early diagnosis rates for complex conditions, had triggered inquiries from academic medical centers nationwide. "Walk and talk," I suggested, continuing toward the executive suite. "I'm meeting Olivia at 8:30 to review the Singapore contract terms." As Rachel updated me on technical challenges the NYU team had encountered with integrating our system into their existing electronic health records, I noticed something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. I was only half listening, trusting her to handle the implementation details without my micromanagement. Before the dual leadership structure, I would have demanded a complete technical breakdown of every issue, insisting on personally approving even minor adjustments. Now, I found myself genuinely delegating, focusing my attention on strategic initiatives rather than operational details. "Sounds like you have it well in hand," I told her as we reached my office. "Let me know if you need additional resources, but otherwise, proceed with your plan." The surprise on her face lasted only a moment before she nodded, clearly pleased with the autonomy. "Will do. I'll have a full progress report by Thursday's executive meeting." Inside my office, now officially labeled CEO, Technology, and Product Development, rather than the generic VP of Technology, title I'd held while doing essentially the same job. I found Olivia already waiting, laptop open, and documents spread across my conference table. "Hope you don't mind I started without you," she said, gesturing to her notes. "The Singaporeans sent over their proposed terms last night, and there are a few wrinkles we should discuss before responding." 6 months ago, I might have felt territorial about finding her in my space, working independently on what I considered my contracts. Now, I simply pulled up a chair beside her, recognizing that our overlapping domains created stronger outcomes than rigid separation. "What wrinkles specifically?" I asked, scanning the document she had highlighted. "They want exclusivity for the Southeast Asian market for 3 years, she explained, which makes sense from their perspective. They're investing significant resources in adapting our systems to their population, but it would limit our expansion opportunities in Vietnam and Thailand, where we've already had preliminary discussions." She'd identified exactly the issue I would have flagged, demonstrating her growing sophistication in technology licensing considerations. "What's your recommendation?" I asked, curious to see her analysis. "Counter with geographic exclusivity, limited to Singapore only, but offer them preferential pricing for any implementations they facilitate throughout the region. That gives them financial incentive to actually help us expand, rather than simply blocking competition." Her solution was elegant, addressing the ministry's underlying concern about protecting their investment while preserving our growth potential. It reflected the unique perspective she brought to our partnership, blending relationship considerations with business strategy in ways my more technically focused approach sometimes missed. "That works," I agreed. "Let's also offer them early access to our pediatric diagnostic module as additional incentive. They've expressed particular interest in that application." As we continued refining our response to the Singaporean proposal, I found myself appreciating the complementary nature of our working relationship. Olivia instinctively grasped the cultural and interpersonal nuances that sometimes eluded me, while I provided the technical depth that gave our proposals credibility with healthcare partners. Together, we created something neither of us could have achieved independently. Our meeting was interrupted by my assistant announcing an unexpected visitor. Our father, who rarely appeared at the office without scheduling in advance. "Send him in," I said, exchanging a curious glance with Olivia. Robert Wilson entered with his characteristic authoritative stride, though I noticed subtle changes in his appearance, his silver hair slightly longer than the regulation corporate cut he'd maintained for decades, his attire business casual, rather than the formal suits that had been his uniform throughout my childhood. "Don't get up," he said as we both began to rise. "I won't stay long. Just wanted to drop these off in person rather than have them messengered over." He placed a manila envelope on the table, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Bored. Materials for next week. I've added an agenda item we should discuss before the meeting." Olivia reached for the envelope. "What agenda item?" "My resignation as executive chairman, effective immediately." The statement hung in the air for a moment both Olivia and I too surprised to immediately respond. According to our transition plan, our father was to remain as executive chairman for 18 months, gradually reducing his involvement as we solidified the dual leadership structure. We were only 6 months into that timeline. "That's unexpected," I finally managed. "Is everything all right?" A brief smile crossed his face. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. The Hospital Foundation Board is taking more of my time than anticipated. We're launching a major capital campaign for a new pediatric research center. But honestly," he paused, seeming to carefully choose his words, "the company doesn't need my oversight anymore. You two have proven that quite definitively." Coming from our father, a man who had controlled every aspect of Wilson Innovations for decades, and dispensed praise with miserly reluctance. This was extraordinary acknowledgement. The board will need to formally approve your early departure, I noted, falling back on practical considerations while processing the emotional implications. Already discussed with Lawrence and Catherine, he replied, referencing our lead independent directors. They're supportive, pending formal vote next week. The question remains, who should replace me as chair? This was the crux of the matter. The executive chairman role had been specifically created to maintain our father's oversight during the transition to dual leadership. With his early departure, the governance structure would need adjustment. We could simply eliminate the position, Olivia suggested. The dual CEO arrangement has proven effective without requiring additional oversight. Our father nodded. That's one option. Alternatively, you could appoint an independent chair from the existing board. Catherine Lynn has the healthcare background and governance experience that would complement your executive roles. The fact that he was presenting options rather than dictating a solution represented yet another evolution in our family's dynamic. The man who had once unilaterally decided to replace me with my sister was now genuinely consulting us as equals. We'll need to discuss the implications for corporate governance, I said, especially given our growth trajectory and potential future capital needs. I trust you'll make the right decision, he replied, moving toward the door. Then he paused, turning back with an expression I rarely saw, something approaching humility. I should have handled the succession planning differently. The dual leadership structure you've created is stronger than what I had envisioned. Sometimes the best outcomes emerge from the most challenging situations. After he left, Olivia and I sat in momentary silence, processing both the practical implications of his resignation and the personal significance of his tacit apology. Well, Olivia finally said, that was approximately 10 times more self-awareness than I've ever heard from him. I laughed, tension breaking. Retirement suits him, apparently. So what do we do about the chairman position? She asked, redirecting to the governance question. I'm inclined toward Catherine as independent chair, I replied after considering the options. She brings valuable healthcare expertise, and having independent board leadership would be viewed positively if we pursue additional institutional investment. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. I agree. Plus, it maintains the separation between family ownership and corporate governance that we've been establishing. The ease with which we reached consensus on this significant decision reflected how far our working relationship had evolved in 6 months. What had begun as a reluctant compromise forged under duress had transformed into a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and recognition of complementary strengths. Later that afternoon, I met with Amir to review technical progress on our pediatric diagnostic module, the system we were offering the Singaporeans as incentive in our contract negotiations. As our most sophisticated AI application to date, it incorporated advanced neural network architectures designed specifically for identifying rare conditions in children, where early intervention could dramatically improve outcomes. The preliminary validation results are exceptional, Amir reported, displaying comparative accuracy metrics across different pediatric subspecialties, particularly in neurological and metabolic disorders, where traditional diagnostic approaches often miss subtle early indicators. What about the diverse population testing? I asked, knowing this had been a particular challenge in previous versions. Are we seeing consistent performance across different ethnic backgrounds? That's actually the most exciting part, he replied, switching to a new data visualization. Maya's team in Singapore has been feeding anonymized patient data from their healthcare system into our training algorithms. The accuracy improvements across Southeast Asian genetic profiles are substantial. The graph showed performance metrics that exceeded even our optimistic projections. By incorporating diverse training data from our Singapore operations, we had created a more robust diagnostic system that worked effectively across patient populations, addressing one of healthcare AI's most persistent criticisms. This is groundbreaking work, I said, genuinely impressed. When can we incorporate these improvements into the domestic version? We're running final validation tests now. Target deployment is 3 weeks out, assuming no unexpected issues arise. As Amir continued detailing the technical specifications, I found myself reflecting on how the international expansion, Olivia's initiative that I had initially approached with skepticism, had ultimately strengthened our core technology in ways I hadn't anticipated. The cross-pollination between our Seattle and Singapore teams had created innovation that neither group would likely have developed in isolation. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren, Dr. Lauren Chen, a computational neuroscientist I had met at a healthcare AI conference 4 months earlier. Our relationship had progressed from professional conversations to casual coffee meetings to increasingly frequent dinners, gradually filling the personal space that had opened in my life. As I learned to delegate more effectively at work. Dinner still on for tonight? Made reservations at that new place on Westlake you mentioned. I smiled, texting back confirmation. 6 months ago, I would have automatically canceled personal plans when faced with significant business developments, like my father's resignation or the Singapore contract negotiations. Today, I found myself protecting this evening with Lauren, despite the demanding workday. Another small but meaningful shift in my gradually rebalancing priorities. When I mentioned the dinner plans to Amir as our meeting concluded, he raised an eyebrow in exaggerated shock. The Jamie Wilson, leaving the office before midnight for a social engagement? What next? Actual vacation days? His teasing reflected a truth we both recognized. My workaholic tendencies had defined me for years, creating both professional success and personal imbalance. The dual leadership structure had inadvertently addressed this dysfunction, forcing me to share control and creating space for life beyond Wilson Innovations. Don't worry, I replied dryly. I'll still be checking email obsessively between courses. Baby steps, he laughed, gathering his materials. Then, more seriously, it's good to see, Jamie. The company's thriving, and you seem more, I don't know, human lately. His observations stayed with me through the afternoon as I worked through technical reviews and strategy documents. Was I more human these past 6 months? The metrics of my life had certainly changed. I now averaged 55-hour work weeks instead of 80+. I had reconnected with Stanford friends I'd neglected for years. I had even joined a rock climbing gym, rediscovering a passion that had been set aside when Wilson Innovations consumed every waking moment. Most significantly, I had begun building a genuine relationship with Lauren, whose brilliant mind and quiet confidence provided a counterpoint to my sometimes too analytical approach to life. Our conversations ranged from technical discussions about neural network architectures to philosophical debates about consciousness to personal reflections on family dynamics. She challenged me intellectually while accepting me emotionally, a combination I hadn't experienced before. That evening at dinner, seated across from Lauren at a table overlooking Lake Union, I found myself describing my father's unexpected resignation and implicit acknowledgement of his mistakes. He actually admitted the dual leadership model is better than his original plan, I explained, still processing the significance of this concession. Coming from a man who has never acknowledged being wrong about anything in his entire life, it's seismic. Lauren considered this, her expression thoughtful. People can surprise us when given the space to evolve. Maybe seeing the company thrive under your shared leadership freed him to reconsider his assumptions. Her perspective, seeing my father's growth rather than focusing on his past mistakes, reflected the compassionate intelligence that had drawn me to her initially. The irony is that this arrangement I fought so hard against has actually improved both the company and my life, I admitted. I'm doing my best work professionally while finally having space for things beyond Wilson Innovations. Like rock climbing and dinner with brilliant neuroscientists? She teased gently. Precisely those things, I agreed, smiling. Though I'm still learning how to turn off the analytical part of my brain outside of work. I don't want that part turned off, she said, her hand covering mine across the table. Just balanced with the other parts. The Jamie who gets excited about climbing routes and asks profound questions about consciousness and remembers exactly how I take my coffee. Her words captured exactly what had been gradually changing in me these past 6 months. Not a fundamental transformation, but a rebalancing that allowed different aspects of myself to emerge from the singular focus that had once defined me. As dinner concluded and we walked along the lakefront, Lauren asked about the next steps for Wilson Innovations given my father's departure. The board meeting next week will formalize his resignation and likely appoint Catherine Lynn as independent chair, I explained. Beyond that, Olivia and I have been discussing potential structural options for the long term. Such as? We're considering formalizing the division between our areas, possibly creating 2 distinct business units under a holding company structure. Wilson Healthcare focusing on our core AI technology and domestic partnerships under my leadership, Wilson Global handling international expansion and new market development under Olivia's. Lauren nodded thoughtfully. Institutionalizing what's already working in practice. Are you thinking about external investment? Her quick grasp of the strategic implications reminded me of her exceptional intelligence, one of many qualities I increasingly appreciated. Potentially. Our valuation has nearly doubled in 6 months. Healthcare AI is attracting premium multiples, and an IPO would provide liquidity for early investors, including my father. Going public would certainly vindicate your vision, she observed. From family drama to Wall Street success story in under 2 years. That's quite a trajectory. Her framing struck me, not because it was inaccurate, but because external validation through an IPO or acquisition now seemed less important to me than it once had. My sense of self-worth had gradually detached from metrics like valuation or titles, a healthier psychological state I hadn't fully appreciated until this moment. The public markets are just one option, I replied. What matters most is preserving the healthcare mission while creating growth opportunities for our team. The structure should serve the purpose, not define it. Lauren smiled, seeming pleased by my response. You really have evolved, Jamie Wilson. 6 months ago, you would have led with the valuation metrics. Blame yourself, I said, taking her hand as we walked. Conversations with brilliant neuroscientists have consequences. The next morning brought news that further validated our dual leadership approach. NYU Medical Center had published preliminary results from their implementation of our rare disease diagnostic module, showing a 37% improvement in early diagnosis rates for complex conditions. The paper specifically cited our unique development methodology that combines technical innovation with user-centered design, another indirect acknowledgement of how Olivia's focus on user experience had enhanced my technical architecture. As I reviewed the publication in my office, Olivia appeared in the doorway, excitement evident in her expression. Have you seen the Singapore team's latest report? She asked, not waiting for an answer before continuing. They've adapted the interface for cultural preferences in information presentation. More visual, less text-heavy, and physician satisfaction scores increased by 42%. The Ministry of Health is ecstatic. She placed her tablet on my desk, showing user engagement metrics that far exceeded our domestic implementations. The adaptations Maya's team had made for Singaporean users, informed by Olivia's insights about cultural differences in information processing, had created a substantially improved experience without compromising the underlying diagnostic accuracy. We should incorporate these learnings into the domestic version, I said, studying the interface modifications. The visual approach might benefit certain specialties here as well. Already discussed it with Rachel, Olivia replied. Her team is creating an adaptive interface that adjusts based on user preferences and specialty. Best of both worlds. The ease with which we now shared ideas and built upon each other's contributions reflected how far our partnership had evolved. What had begun as a reluctant compromise had transformed into a genuine collaboration that leveraged our complementary strengths. As we prepared for the board meeting that would formalize our father's resignation and the next phase of Wilson Innovations' governance, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. The crisis that had begun with my father's shocking announcement had ultimately strengthened both the company and our family in ways none of us could have predicted. My father had found purpose beyond controlling the business he had built, embracing his hospital foundation role with unexpected passion. Olivia had discovered leadership capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, transforming from a reluctant executive into a visionary driving international growth. And I had learned that sharing leadership didn't necessarily dilute it, but could actually amplify it in unexpected ways, creating space for both professional excellence and personal growth. Most importantly, Wilson Innovations itself had evolved from a promising regional healthcare AI company into an emerging global leader with distinctive competitive advantages. Our dual leadership structure, once viewed as an awkward compromise, had become a signature strength, allowing us to simultaneously drive technical innovation and market expansion at a pace neither Olivia nor I could have maintained independently. As I gathered materials for the board presentation, I came across the document that had started this transformation. My hastily assembled Project Keystone Leverage plan from the night after the anniversary dinner. Reading through my contingency, options from 6 months earlier, I was struck by how narrowly I had defined winning in that moment of crisis. I had focused entirely on maintaining control rather than envisioning possibilities beyond the traditional leadership structure. The path we had ultimately taken, the dual leadership model that had emerged from necessity, had created outcomes far superior to either my father's original plan or my preferred alternative. It was a humbling reminder that sometimes the best solutions emerge not from winning a power struggle, but from finding a third option that transcends the original conflict entirely. When Olivia appeared at my door, ready to walk together to the boardroom, I felt an unexpected sense of partnership that transcended our professional arrangement. We had navigated a potentially devastating family conflict and emerged with both our business and our relationship strengthened. Whatever challenges lay ahead, taking the company public, expanding into new markets, facing inevitable technological disruptions, we would face them with complementary strengths and shared purpose. "Ready for the next chapter?" she asked, her expression reflecting both confidence and the familial connection that had gradually strengthened through our shared leadership journey. "Absolutely," I replied, gathering the final documents. "Though I suspect it won't unfold exactly as we're planning." She laughed, the sound reminding me briefly of our childhood, Olivia always embracing uncertainty while I sought to control it. "The best chapters never do, Jamie. That's what makes them worth writing." Together, we walked toward the boardroom, no longer reluctant adversaries in a family power struggle, but genuine partners in building something neither of us could have created alone. A company that honored our father's legacy while transcending his limited vision, a leadership model that leveraged our distinct talents rather than forcing an artificial choice between them, and a family relationship reforged through professional collaboration rather than broken by inevitable competition. The battle for Wilson Innovations had ended not with a victor and vanquished, but with transformation. For the company, for our family, and perhaps most significantly, for me. I had fought to protect what I had built and discovered something more valuable in the process, the capacity to grow beyond my own limitations by embracing unexpected possibilities. 1 year to the day after my father's announcement at the Grand Peninsula Hotel, Wilson Innovations held another celebration in the same ballroom. The occasion was markedly different this time, marking not a leadership transition, but a milestone. Achievement. Our Singapore operation had launched successfully, our dual company structure had been formalized, and our valuation had surpassed $500 million according to our latest funding round. The room was filled with many of the same people who had witnessed my public demotion a year earlier. Now they gathered to celebrate our most successful year in company history, $150 million in revenue, international expansion, and a solidified position as a leader in healthcare artificial intelligence. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood at the podium, surveying faces that had once offered me sympathetic glances, now looking on with genuine admiration. "Welcome, everyone," I began, my voice carrying across the expectant room. Exactly 1 year ago, Wilson Innovations embarked on an unexpected journey, a fundamental rethinking of how we operate, how we lead, and how we grow. That journey taught us something invaluable. True strength comes not from rigid adherence to tradition, but from recognizing and leveraging diverse talents. I gestured toward the displays around the room showcasing our expanded product line. MediMind implementations across 3 continents, the new rare disease diagnostic platform, and our pioneering work-adapting AI systems for genetically diverse populations. Tonight we celebrate not just financial success, but a more fundamental achievement: building a company where innovation thrives, where different perspectives create better outcomes, and where leadership takes many forms rather than following a single model. As I introduced Olivia to discuss our international strategy, I caught my father's eye in the audience. He sat beside my mother, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in decades, a man who had finally made peace with releasing control. When he nodded slightly in acknowledgement, I felt a sense of completion, not because his approval still defined my worth, but because it represented healing in a relationship that had once seemed irreparably damaged. Olivia took the stage, with the natural charisma that had proven so valuable in our client relationships and international partnerships. When Jamie and I first discussed the dual leadership model, we viewed it primarily as a compromise, a way to preserve what was working while creating space for new directions. What we discovered instead was a genuine synthesis of complementary strengths. She outlined the extraordinary growth of our international operations, particularly the Singapore implementation that had exceeded even our optimistic projections. The Ministry of Health had not only deployed our system nationwide, but had become an active partner in adapting it for neighboring countries, creating a regional hub for healthcare AI that positioned us years ahead of competitors attempting to enter Asian markets. By respecting domain expertise rather than forcing a single leadership approach, we've been able to move simultaneously in multiple directions, deepening our technical capabilities while expanding our global reach, she concluded. The results speak for themselves. More lives improved through better healthcare, more opportunities for our team members, and yes, exceptional financial performance that makes our investors very happy. The audience laughed appreciatively at her candid acknowledgement of the bottom line, the undeniable metric that had silenced even the most skeptical observers of our unconventional governance structure. When quarterly results consistently exceed expectations, governance debates tend to fade into the background. Later that evening, as guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, I found myself on the hotel's outdoor terrace overlooking Elliott Bay. The Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky, the Wilson Innovations logo visible atop our downtown headquarters. "Penny for your thoughts?" Lauren's voice pulled me from my reverie. Dr. Lauren Chen had moved from occasional date to significant relationship over the past 6 months, her brilliant mind and quiet confidence providing a counterpoint to my sometimes too analytical approach to life. "Just reflecting on how much has changed in a year," I replied, taking her hand. "From crisis to opportunity." "Your speech was good," she said, "though you left out the part where you nearly went nuclear and started a competing company." I laughed, softly. "Some details aren't meant for public consumption." "Fair enough, though I'm glad you didn't go that route. The Wilson siblings are much more interesting together than apart." Her observation was insightful as always. Together, Olivia and I had created something neither of us could have built independently. My technical vision and her global perspective had proven complementary in ways no one, least of all our father, could have predicted. Lauren glanced at her watch. We should head back in soon. The formal announcement is in 20 minutes. The announcement she referenced was significant. Our board had unanimously approved a 2-year roadmap toward an initial public offering, with the dual company structure providing clean governance and focused investment theses for public markets. I would remain CEO of Wilson Healthcare, Olivia would lead Wilson Global, and our father would transition to Chairman Emeritus, an honorary title that acknowledged his founding role while formalizing his departure from operational oversight. As we turned to rejoin the celebration, I spotted Olivia across the terrace, deep in conversation with Maya and our Singapore team members who had flown in for the event. Her animated gestures and their engaged expressions reflected the genuine connection she had built with our international operations, relationships that transcended business transactions to create true cultural bridges. When she caught my eye and smiled, I felt a surge of gratitude for the crisis that had ultimately led to this transformation. What had begun as a fight for recognition had evolved into something more meaningful, a partnership built on mutual respect, a family reconciliation forged through professional collaboration, and a business model that honored both tradition and innovation. The board announcement proceeded smoothly, with Catherine Lin, our independent chairperson, outlining the IPO roadmap with the precision one would expect from a former healthcare executive with extensive public company experience. The plan was ambitious but measured, establishing separate public entities for Wilson Healthcare and Wilson Global under the Wilson Innovations holding structure, creating distinct investment opportunities while maintaining strategic alignment. This approach allows investors to participate specifically in either the healthcare AI vertical or the international expansion story, while preserving the synergies that have driven our recent growth, Catherine explained. It also creates a governance structure that will scale effectively as both businesses continue to expand. The timeline projected an initial public offering in approximately 24 months, following completion of audited financials and necessary regulatory preparations. The measured approach reflected the careful balance we had struck between ambition and discipline, moving decisively toward public markets without rushing critical foundational steps. After the formal announcement, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers, employees expressing excitement about the growth opportunities, investors congratulating themselves on backing our vision, healthcare partners discussing expansion possibilities. The contrast with the awkward condolences I had received a year earlier in this same room couldn't have been starker. As the evening wound down, my father approached, champagne glass in hand. "A toast," he said, his voice carrying just enough to attract the attention of those nearby. "To Wilson Innovations, past, present, and future." It was a simple sentiment, but the inclusivity of his wording spoke volumes. Not my company, as he would have once phrased it, but a collective enterprise spanning generations and leadership styles. As we clinked glasses, his expression held genuine pride without the controlling assessment I had grown accustomed to throughout my life. "Your grandfather would have approved," he added quietly, referencing his father who had co-founded the original software consultancy. "He always said the best leaders know when to hold tight and when to let go." Took me longer than it should have to understand what he meant. Coming from my father, this self-reflection bordered on the miraculous. I nodded, accepting the implicit acknowledgement without requiring him to state it more explicitly. Some progress happened in small steps rather than dramatic declarations. As guests began departing, Olivia joined us, slipping her arm through our father's with casual affection. "The Singapore team wants to take us to dinner tomorrow night at their favorite authentic place in the International District," she told me. "Maya says their chili crab is life-changing." "I'm in," I agreed, glancing at Lauren, who nodded her assent as well. "What about you, Dad?" Olivia asked. "Care to join the international diplomacy dinner?" He considered briefly before shaking his head. "You young people enjoy yourselves. Your mother and I have symphony tickets tomorrow. Yo-Yo Ma is performing." The casual normality of this exchange, family members discussing plans without power dynamics or hidden agendas, represented perhaps the most profound transformation of the past year. The Wilson family had evolved from a hierarchical structure defined by our father's authority to a network of adult relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. 2 days after the anniversary celebration, I found myself in a meeting. That would have been unimaginable a year earlier, working directly with Olivia and Maya to refine our approach to the Southeast Asian healthcare market. Our Singapore operations had proven so successful that health ministries in Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia had initiated discussions about implementing our diagnostic AI systems. Each country presents distinct considerations, Maya explained, displaying comparative healthcare system analyses on the conference room screen. Vietnam has centralized decision-making but limited infrastructure in rural areas. Thailand has more advanced technical capabilities but a complex approval process, involving multiple stakeholders. Malaysia falls somewhere between, with strong urban centers but significant regional disparities. Her response came quickly. Should we send a copy to Dad with a thank you note for his accidental wisdom? The joke reflected how far we had all come, able to find humor in a situation that had once been painfully divisive. Our father's decision, though poorly executed and initially motivated by outdated notions of family succession, had ultimately catalyzed a governance innovation that strengthened the company beyond what any single leader model could have achieved. That evening, as promised, the Singapore team hosted us at an authentic seafood restaurant in Seattle's International District. The atmosphere was celebratory, with team members from both continents sharing stories that blended professional achievements with cultural exchanges. Maya recounted her initially disastrous attempt to navigate Singapore's hawker centers, while our Singaporean colleagues described their first experience with Seattle's notoriously complex coffee ordering protocols. Midway through the meal, Lauren leaned close to whisper in my ear. A year ago, would you have ever imagined yourself enjoying a dinner like this instead of working until midnight? Her question prompted genuine reflection. Prior to the dual leadership structure, I had regularly worked 80-hour weeks, rarely socializing with team members, and certainly never prioritizing international cultural exchanges over technical development, meetings. My identity had been so thoroughly intertwined with Wilson Innovations that I had viewed any time not devoted to the company as an indulgence I couldn't afford. Not in a million years, I admitted. I was too busy proving myself indispensable to recognize I was also making myself one-dimensional. Lauren's hand found mine under the table. For what it's worth, I prefer this multi-dimensional Jamie Wilson. He's considerably more interesting company. As the evening progressed, I observed Olivia seamlessly navigating cultural nuances, remembering personal details about team members' families, acknowledging cultural holidays, making inside jokes that bridged Seattle and Singapore experiences. These social capabilities that I had once dismissed as superficial had proven invaluable in building the international relationships that now drove nearly 40% of our revenue. Watching her in action, I recognized how fundamentally my perspective had shifted. A year ago, I had viewed leadership exclusively through the lens of technical expertise and strategic decision-making, areas where I excelled. Now I understood that effective leadership, particularly in a global organization, required a much broader skill set, including the emotional intelligence and cultural adaptability that came naturally to Olivia. The realization wasn't humbling, so much as expanding. I hadn't become less valuable by acknowledging her complementary strengths. Rather, Wilson Innovations had become more robust by incorporating both our capabilities. The company we were building together was stronger than what either of us could have created alone. 2 weeks after the anniversary celebration, I sat in a quarterly strategy meeting that perfectly illustrated our evolved approach. The executive team was discussing potential expansion into preventative healthcare applications, using our diagnostic AI to identify risk factors before conditions developed, rather than recognizing diseases once they appeared. The technical approach is straightforward, I explained, outlining how our existing neural network architecture could be adapted for predictive modeling. The challenge is securing longitudinal patient data for training algorithms. Healthcare systems typically optimize for episodic treatment, rather than continuous monitoring. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. That's where our Singapore implementation gives us an advantage. Their nationalized healthcare structure means patient data spans decades rather than individual treatment episodes. If we could secure approval to use anonymized historical records for algorithm training, we'd have a dataset no competitor could match. Exactly what I was thinking, I agreed. Maya's team has already built relationships with their data governance officials. We could potentially structure a research partnership that benefits both sides. They get early access to preventative tools while we develop more robust algorithms. The conversation continued seamlessly, with technical considerations and market opportunities weaving together into a comprehensive strategy. There was no longer any sense of separate domains or competing priorities, just a unified approach that incorporated multiple perspectives. As the meeting concluded, Catherine Lin, our independent chairperson, remained behind. That was impressive, she noted. The integration between technical vision and market application is exceptionally fluid now. It's evolved naturally, acknowledged. We've each absorbed elements of the other's perspective. That's precisely why the board is so confident in the IPO timeline, she replied. Dual company structures only work with strong cultural alignment between divisions. You and Olivia have created that alignment in a remarkably short time frame. Her observation highlighted another unexpected benefit of our shared leadership journey. By working through our initial tensions and finding productive collaboration, we had modeled integration that now permeated the entire organization. Technical teams regularly incorporated market feedback into development priorities. Business development consulted with engineering before making client commitments. The artificial boundaries that typically plague technology companies had largely dissolved in favor of fluid information exchange. That afternoon, as I reviewed technical documentation for our preventative healthcare initiative, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, my mother, who rarely came to the office. She entered hesitantly, looking around with evident curiosity. "Mom," I said, rising to greet her. "This is a pleasant surprise." "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," she replied, still taking in the surroundings. The multiple monitors displaying algorithm visualizations, the whiteboards covered with neural network diagrams, the general atmosphere of focused innovation. "Nothing that can't wait. What brings you by?" She smiled, seeming slightly self-conscious. "Your father mentioned the preventative healthcare project you're developing. It reminded me of something from years ago that might be relevant." This was unexpected. My mother had always maintained a careful separation between family and business, supporting from the sidelines but never directly engaging with company initiatives. "What kind of something?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Before I married your father, I was studying public health at the University of Washington," she explained, opening the portfolio she carried. "My graduate research focused on community-based preventative health screening programs, particularly for underserved populations." I stared at her in astonishment. In 35 years, I had never heard my mother mention graduate studies in public health. She had always been introduced and described as a corporate wife and community volunteer, her identity subsumed by my father's business prominence. "I didn't know you had a public health background," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. A shadow crossed her face. "It was a different era. When your father and I married, it was expected that I would focus on supporting his career and raising a family." She shrugged slightly. "I don't regret those choices, but sometimes I wonder what direction my work might have taken." She opened the portfolio to reveal meticulously preserved research papers, data analyses, and program evaluations, all focused on preventative health screening implementations in diverse communities. The work was thoughtful, methodical, and potentially valuable to our current initiative. These community engagement models might be relevant to how you introduce preventative AI tools, particularly in populations that have historically limited access to healthcare technology, she suggested, showing me detailed implementation frameworks that had proven effective decades earlier. As we reviewed her research together, I experienced a profound shift in perspective. My mother, whom I had always viewed primarily through the lens of her relationship to my father, emerged as a thoughtful healthcare researcher with genuine expertise relevant to our most innovative work. The revelation prompted uncomfortable questions about how many other women of her generation had subordinated their professional capabilities to family expectations. "This is genuinely valuable." "Mom," I said, examining her community engagement models, "would you be willing to discuss these approaches with our implementation team? Your experience could help us avoid common pitfalls in introducing new healthcare technologies." Her expression brightened with surprised pleasure. "You think it would be helpful? It's been so many years since I worked in the field. The fundamental human factors in healthcare adoption haven't changed," I assured her. "Technology evolves, but effective community engagement principles remain constant." As I scheduled a meeting between my mother and our implementation specialists, I reflected on how the past year's transformation extended beyond just Olivia and me. Our father had found purpose beyond controlling the company he had built. Our mother was reclaiming professional interests long subordinated to family responsibilities. The entire Wilson family dynamic had evolved from rigid hierarchy toward multidimensional relationships that honored each person's unique capabilities. That evening, I recounted the interaction to Lauren over dinner at my apartment. "I've worked alongside my father for a decade, and somehow never knew my mother had graduate-level public health expertise directly relevant to our work." Lauren nodded thoughtfully. "Family dynamics often obscure individual identities. We see people in relational roles, mother, father, sister, brother, rather than as complete humans with their own histories and capabilities." Her observation captured exactly what had been gradually changing in our family over the past year. We were finally beginning to see each other as complete individuals rather than merely fulfilling prescribed roles in a family business narrative. The dual leadership structure created space for everyone to evolve, I realized. Not just Olivia and me professionally, but our entire family dynamic. Sometimes systems need disruption before they can reconfigure into healthier patterns. Lauren agreed. "Your father's poorly executed succession plan was the disruption. Everything that's happened since has been the reconfiguration." Her framing provided a helpful perspective on the tumultuous journey of the past year. What had begun as a crisis had ultimately catalyzed growth for everyone involved, not despite the initial conflict, but because of how it had forced us to reconsider established patterns. As Lauren helped me prepare coffee, moving comfortably through my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there, I found myself contemplating a future I wouldn't have imagined a year earlier, one that balanced professional achievement with personal fulfillment, that made space for relationships beyond work, that measured success in dimensions beyond corporate metrics. The Wilson innovation story was evolving in unexpected ways, transforming from a traditional family business saga into something more nuanced and ultimately more meaningful. We were building not just a successful company, but a model for how family relationships, professional partnerships, and personal growth could interact and reinforce each other, rather than existing in competition. 2 years after my father's shocking announcement at the Grand Peninsula Hotel, Wilson Innovations achieved a milestone that would have once seemed impossible. A successful initial public offering that established Wilson Healthcare and Wilson Global as separate public companies under the Wilson Innovations holding structure. The Wall Street Journal called it one of the most successful healthcare technology IPOs of the year, with both entities trading significantly above their offering prices and attracting substantial institutional investment. 5 years have passed since that pivotal moment when my father announced my sister would take over the company I had built. Wilson Innovations has transformed beyond what any of us could have imagined that night at the Grand Peninsula Hotel. Our successful IPO 2 years ago established Wilson Healthcare and Wilson Global as separate public companies under the Wilson Innovations holding structure, with a combined market capitalization now exceeding $2 billion. The healthcare AI platforms I developed have expanded beyond diagnostics into treatment optimization and preventative care, with MetaMind systems now deployed in over 500 medical facilities across 4 continents. Our algorithms have helped identify more than 40,000 rare disease cases that might otherwise have gone undiagnosed or been caught too late for effective intervention. Each notification represents not just a data point, but a human life potentially saved or improved through earlier treatment, the metric that matters most to me despite Wall Street's focus on quarterly earnings. Olivia's international vision has created a global footprint that would have been unimaginable under our father's conservative leadership. Wilson Global now maintains innovation hubs in Singapore, London, and São Paulo, each adapting our core technologies to regional healthcare needs and cultural contexts. Her natural gift for relationship building has opened doors that would have remained firmly closed to my more technical approach, particularly in countries where business partnerships are built on personal connections rather than specifications sheets. My father, now fully retired, has found unexpected purpose mentoring young healthcare entrepreneurs through a foundation he established with proceeds from the IPO. The man who once measured success exclusively through control and authority now derives satisfaction from supporting others' visions, a transformation none of us anticipated. He and I meet monthly for lunch, our conversations ranging from industry trends to philosophical discussions about purpose and legacy. The competitive tension that once defined our relationship has gradually dissolved into mutual respect, if not always complete understanding. More surprisingly, my mother has reclaimed her long-dormant interest in public health, leveraging her graduate research to help develop community engagement strategies for introducing preventative healthcare technologies in underserved populations. The implementation framework she created now serves as a model for our global deployments, with her name proudly listed as principal author on white papers distributed throughout the healthcare industry. At 70, she has found a second professional act that honors capabilities subordinated during her years as a corporate wife. As for me, the personal evolution has been perhaps even more significant than the professional achievements. Lauren and I married 3 years ago, blending our mutual passion for healthcare technology with shared interests in rock climbing, philosophical discussions, and building a life that balances achievement with presence. Our daughter Elizabeth, named after Lauren's grandmother, celebrated her first birthday last month, a milestone that prompted reflection on how profoundly my priorities have shifted. 5 years ago, I defined myself almost exclusively through Wilson Innovations, measuring self-worth through company metrics and technical achievements. Today, while the company remains a central focus, it no longer constitutes my entire identity. Fatherhood has particularly transformed my perspective, revealing the limitations of the workaholic mindset that once seemed necessary for success. I now recognize that sustainable leadership requires renewal and connection beyond office walls, a balance I'm still learning to maintain but committed to modeling for Elizabeth as she grows. This morning, as I prepared for a quarterly board meeting, Elizabeth crawled into my home office, her determined expression reminding me startlingly of my own focused intensity when tackling complex problems. Lauren followed, coffee mug in hand, observing our daughter's persistent efforts to reach a tablet just beyond her grasp. The Wilson determination gene appears dominant, Lauren noted with amusement. Though I'm hoping the Chen diplomacy traits express themselves eventually to balance things out. I lifted Elizabeth onto my lap, redirecting her from the tablet to a plush toy designed to develop motor skills. The next generation of Wilson Innovations, I said, watching her methodically explore the toy's interactive features. Speaking of which, Lauren said, Have you thought more about Olivia's proposal? The proposal in question represented perhaps the most significant evolution of our dual leadership structure. After 5 successful years operating as separate public companies with complementary missions, Olivia had suggested integrating our preventative healthcare initiatives into a new joint venture, Wilson Preventative Health, that would combine Wilson Healthcare's advanced predictive algorithms with Wilson Global's community implementation expertise. I'm bringing it to the board today, I confirmed. The preliminary financial models are compelling, and more importantly, the potential healthcare impact is substantial. Predictive intervention could fundamentally change how chronic diseases are managed globally. Lauren nodded thoughtfully. It brings everything full circle in a way, doesn't it? The crisis that separated your leadership domains ultimately creating something that requires them to reunite. Her observation captured the irony perfectly. The artificial division created by our father's succession plan had evolved into specialized focus that strengthened both companies. Now, 5 years later, we were voluntarily recombining those specialized capabilities to address healthcare challenges neither company could solve independently. I should get going, I said, glancing at my watch. The board meeting starts in an hour, and I promised Olivia we'd review the joint venture materials beforehand. Lauren took Elizabeth from my arms. Go change the future of preventative healthcare. We'll be at the park exploring the fascinating world of swings and sandboxes. As I drove to our corporate headquarters, now occupying 3 floors of a downtown Seattle high-rise with our illuminated logo visible across the skyline, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 5 years. The conflict that had begun with my father's shocking announcement had catalyzed growth for our business, our family, and most significantly, for me personally. What had initially seemed like a devastating setback had ultimately created space for multiple forms of evolution that might never have occurred otherwise. Olivia was waiting in the boardroom when I arrived, reviewing presentation materials with the focused intensity she brought to significant initiatives. Her business attire, a tailored suit that projected authority while maintaining her distinctive style, contrasted with memories of the casual traveler who had returned to Seattle just 5 years earlier, unsure of her place in the family business. Perfect timing, she said, looking up with a smile. I was just making final adjustments to the financial projections based on the Singapore pilot data. I set down my bag and joined her at the conference table. How did the community engagement metrics look? Exceptional, she replied, turning her tablet to show me the results. Mom's implementation framework yielded 86% participation in the target communities, nearly double the industry standard for preventative screening programs. The results validated what we had discovered repeatedly over the past 5 years. Our mother's public health expertise, long overshadowed by family dynamics, represented a genuine competitive advantage in deploying healthcare technologies among diverse populations. Her understanding of community adoption factors had proven invaluable as we expanded globally, particularly in regions with historical skepticism toward Western medical approaches. These numbers will impress the board, I noted, reviewing the detailed breakdowns. But I think the patient outcome visualizations will be even more compelling. I pulled up the presentation section showing how early intervention based on our predictive algorithms had already prevented disease progression. In the pilot population, the data told a powerful story of healthcare transformation, not just incremental improvement, but fundamental change in how chronic conditions could be managed through preventative approaches. It's remarkable what we've built, Olivia said quietly, studying the visualizations. Not just successful companies, but genuine healthcare impact at scale. Her comment captured what had become our shared purpose beyond corporate metrics. While investor returns remained important, they had become a means rather than an end, the financial engine that powered our broader mission of healthcare transformation. As board members began arriving for the quarterly meeting, I observed how comfortable Olivia had become in these governance settings. The woman who had once asked me to explain basic AI concepts now discussed algorithmic bias mitigation strategies, with sophisticated understanding. She had evolved from reluctant successor to visionary leader, earning respect through demonstrated capability rather than inherited position. The board meeting proceeded efficiently through standard quarterly business, financial results, operational updates, strategic initiatives. Both Wilson Healthcare and Wilson Global had exceeded analyst expectations for the quarter, driving stock appreciation that positioned our companies among the top performers in the healthcare technology sector. When we reached the joint venture proposal, Catherine Lynn, who continued to serve as independent chair of Wilson Innovations, turned the floor over to us for the presentation. Wilson Preventative Health represents a natural evolution of our complementary capabilities, I began, outlining how predictive algorithms developed by Wilson Healthcare could be deployed through Wilson Global's implementation framework to revolutionize preventative care globally. Olivia followed with the business case and operational structure, a separate entity jointly owned by both public companies, combining specialized talent from each organization under unified leadership focused exclusively on preventative applications. The proposed governance model maintains our specialized focus while creating space for innovation at the intersection of our domains, she explained. Technical excellence and market responsiveness in perfect balance. The board's response was overwhelmingly positive, with questions focused on implementation timelines rather than conceptual viability. The successful track record of our dual leadership approach had earned credibility that made even unconventional proposals receive serious consideration. As the meeting concluded, Catherine Lynn offered her perspective. 5 years ago, many of us viewed the dual leadership structure as a necessary compromise created by family circumstances. Today, it's clear that model has become a signature strength. This joint venture represents its natural evolution, specialized excellence recombining to address challenges neither company could solve independently. Her framing captured precisely what Olivia and I had come to understand through our shared journey. What had begun as an awkward compromise had evolved into complementary specialization that ultimately created space for recombination in new and powerful ways. After the board formally approved the joint venture concept, authorizing detailed implementation planning to proceed, Olivia and I found ourselves alone in the boardroom. The moment felt significant, a milestone in our continuing evolution, from reluctant co-leaders to genuine partners in healthcare innovation. Dad called yesterday, Olivia mentioned as we gathered our materials. He wants to have dinner this weekend to discuss the Foundation's potential role in the preventative health initiative. Apparently, they've developed community engagement strategies in underserved areas that might complement Mom's framework. I nodded, still marveling at how thoroughly our father had reinvented himself in retirement. The man who had once defined success through control now found fulfillment in supporting others' visions, including initiatives led by the children he had once sought to mold in his image. Family dinner at their place? I asked, mentally checking my calendar. That's what he suggested. Sunday at 6. He specifically mentioned wanting to see Elizabeth. Apparently, she's the only topic that comes up in his golf games these days. I smiled, recognizing another unexpected transformation of the past 5 years. My father, once singularly focused on business legacy, had discovered genuine delight in grandparenthood. He approached time with Elizabeth with a presence and playfulness I had rarely experienced in my own childhood, as if retirement had finally given him permission to express the warmth that business competition had once suppressed. "We'll be there," I confirmed. Lauren's been wanting to discuss her preventative neurological screening research with Mom anyway. Their collaborative paper on community engagement strategies in early intervention programs is nearly ready for publication. The easy domesticity of this exchange, coordinating family dinner, discussing cross-generational professional collaborations, balancing parental responsibilities, represented perhaps the most profound transformation of the past 5 years. The Wilson family dynamics had evolved from rigid hierarchy and competition into multi-dimensional relationships that honored each person's unique capabilities while creating space for genuine connection. As we walked toward the elevators, Olivia asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Are you happy, Jamie? Not just successful, actually happy?" 5 years ago, I would have automatically conflated professional achievement with personal fulfillment, pointing to Wilson Healthcare's performance metrics or technological breakthroughs as evidence of happiness. Today, the question prompted more nuanced reflection. "I am," I replied with genuine conviction. Not in the simplistic way I might have defined it before. Constant achievement and recognition. Something deeper and more balanced. Olivia nodded. Thoughtfully. "I feel the same way. It's like we each found our authentic path rather than following prescribed roles. You were never meant to be the sole leader managing every aspect of a global corporation. I was never meant to be just a creative wanderer without meaningful impact. We each needed to find our own expression of the Wilson legacy." Her insight captured exactly what had unfolded over these 5 years. We had each discovered purpose that honored our genuine capabilities rather than conforming to external expectations. Whether those imposed by our father's traditional views or by our own limited self-perceptions. "And now we've come full circle with Wilson Preventative Health," I observed as we reached the lobby. "Specialized focus creating the foundation for meaningful recombination." "Life rarely follows linear paths," Olivia replied with the perspective gained from her years of global travel. "It's more like a spiral, returning to similar points but at different levels of understanding." Her insight resonated as we parted ways. She to a video conference with our Southeast Asian team, I to a demonstration of our newest predictive algorithm. Our paths had indeed spiraled rather than diverged, creating a leadership model stronger than either of us could have built alone. That evening at home, as Lauren and I prepared dinner while Elizabeth explored the living room with determined curiosity, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had transformed not just Wilson Innovations, but our entire family. The crisis that had begun with my father's shocking announcement had catalyzed growth in directions none of us could have predicted. "You're contemplative tonight," Lauren observed, sliding vegetables into the roasting pan. "Thinking about the joint venture?" "That and everything that led to it," I admitted. 5 years ago, I viewed my father's decision as the worst betrayal imaginable. Now I can almost see it as the disruption we needed. Painful, but ultimately productive. Lauren nodded thoughtfully. "Systems often require destabilization before they can reorganize into healthier patterns. Your father's poorly executed succession plan was the destabilizing event. Everything since has been reorganization." Her framing captured exactly what had unfolded. Wilson Innovations had reorganized from a traditional family business with concentrated leadership into a diversified enterprise that leveraged specialized expertise. Our family had reorganized from hierarchical relationships defined by control into collaborative connections built on mutual respect. And I had reorganized from a one-dimensional workaholic into a more balanced individual who found fulfillment beyond professional achievement. Elizabeth's delighted squeal drew our attention as she discovered a new capability, pulling herself to standing using the coffee table. Her face glowed with accomplishment as she surveyed the room from this new perspective, teetering slightly but determined to maintain her position. "Another milestone," Lauren said, smiling at our daughter's persistence. "She's definitely inherited the Wilson determination. Along with the Chen thoughtfulness," I added, noting how Elizabeth studied the situation before attempting her next move. The best of both approaches. The observation paralleled what had happened with Wilson Innovations under our dual leadership, combining the focused determination I brought to technical innovation with Olivia's thoughtful approach to relationship building and cultural adaptation. Neither approach alone would have achieved what the synthesis had created. Sunday evening found us gathered around my parents' dining table, a family dinner that would have seemed impossibly relaxed and genuine 5 years earlier. My father entertained Elizabeth with playful interactions, that revealed a warmth rarely displayed during my own childhood. My mother and Lauren discussed their collaborative research on community engagement strategies for neurological screening programs. Olivia shared animated stories from her recent trip to our São Paulo Innovation Hub, where local developers had adapted our preventative screening technology for Brazil's unique healthcare challenges. As I observed these interactions, I realized how thoroughly our family narrative had transformed. We had evolved from a traditional patriarchal structure with my father at the apex to a network of interconnected relationships that honored each person's unique contributions. The business hierarchy that had once defined our interactions had dissolved in favor of authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than position or authority. "I've been reviewing the preventative healthcare joint venture materials," my father said as we moved to coffee and dessert. "The foundation would like to contribute our community implementation framework as part of a strategic partnership. We've developed approaches in rural and underserved communities that might complement your existing deployment strategies." The offer reflected how completely he had embraced his post-corporate identity. Rather than attempting to control or direct the joint venture, he was offering resources that might support its success, participating as a collaborative partner rather than an authoritative figure. "That would be valuable," Olivia acknowledged, "particularly as we expand into regions with limited healthcare infrastructure. Your foundation's experience in those environments would accelerate our learning curve considerably." The practical, collegial nature of this exchange, so different from the hierarchical interactions that had characterized our family business discussions in the past, highlighted perhaps the most significant transformation of the past 5 years. We had evolved from prescribed roles in a family business narrative to authentic expressions of our individual capabilities, collaborating where those capabilities created synergy rather than competing for position or recognition. As the evening concluded and we prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside briefly. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, his expression uncharacteristically reflective. "Watching how you've balanced leadership with fatherhood this past year, it's given me perspective on my own choices." The admission caught me off guard. My father rarely acknowledged regrets or mistakes, preferring to focus on forward movement rather than retrospective analysis. "What perspective specifically?" I asked, curious about his thinking. "That I missed opportunities with you and Olivia by defining success too narrowly," he replied with surprising candor. "Seeing you create space for both professional achievement and genuine presence with Elizabeth, it's a better model than what I demonstrated." The acknowledgement, simple but profound, represented healing in our relationship that I hadn't realized I still needed. Not because his approval still defined my worth, but because it reflected genuine growth in a relationship that had once seemed permanently constrained by rigid patterns. "I'm still figuring it out day by day," I admitted. "But having multiple dimensions of fulfillment actually makes me more effective in each area, not less. Something I didn't understand when Wilson Innovations consumed my entire identity." He nodded thoughtfully. "A lesson that took me 70 years to learn. But perhaps that's the true family legacy, not just building successful businesses, but evolving toward more balanced approaches to leadership across generations." His framing offered a perspective I hadn't considered, that each Wilson generation might contribute not just to business growth, but to the evolution of leadership itself, with my father's driven but ultimately imbalanced approach giving way to the more sustainable model Olivia and I had developed, which might in turn evolve further as Elizabeth's generation eventually entered the picture. Driving home that night, with Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in her car seat and Lauren recounting highlights from her conversation with my mother, I felt a sense of completion that transcended professional achievement. The story that had begun with crisis and conflict 5 years earlier had transformed into something more nuanced and ultimately more meaningful. Not a simple tale of victory or defeat, but a complex narrative of growth, reconciliation, and reinvention. Wilson Innovations had evolved from a struggling software consultancy to a globally recognized healthcare AI leader, now pioneering preventative approaches that could fundamentally change how chronic diseases were managed worldwide. But the more significant transformation had occurred in the human systems surrounding the business. Family relationships reconfigured from hierarchy toward partnership, individual identities expanded beyond prescribed roles, leadership models evolved from singular authority to complementary collaboration. The next morning, as I prepared for the initial planning session for Wilson Preventative Health, I found myself reflecting on the wisdom I had gained through this 5-year journey. Insights I hope to eventually share with Elizabeth as she developed her own understanding of purpose and fulfillment. Know your worth beyond position or title. The fight that began over who would be CEO had ultimately revealed that genuine value comes from contribution rather than designation. By focusing on building rather than controlling, both Olivia and I had created leadership domains that honored our authentic capabilities rather than conforming to traditional expectations. Prepare for unexpected outcomes. The meticulous contingency planning I had done after my father's announcement, the leverage points and legal strategies, had ultimately proven less important than flexibility in responding to emerging possibilities. The dual leadership structure that had begun as a compromise had evolved into a competitive advantage precisely because we remained open to its unexpected potential. Find allies based on capability rather than convenience. Throughout our journey, relationships built on mutual respect for demonstrated expertise, with team members like Maya, board members like Catherine, and eventually even family members like our mother, had proven more durable and productive than alliances based on politics or position. Seek integration rather than domination. The most powerful outcomes had emerged not from winning zero-sum competitions, but from finding synthesis between seemingly opposing approaches: technical excellence and relationship building, strategic focus and operational flexibility, professional achievement and personal presence. Embrace the spiral nature of growth. The journey hadn't followed a linear path from conflict to resolution, but rather a spiral that periodically returned to similar questions at different levels of understanding. The leadership structure had evolved from forced separation to specialized focus to deliberate recombination, each phase building on lessons from the previous iteration. As I arrived at Wilson Innovations headquarters for the joint venture planning session, I spotted Olivia already waiting in the lobby, engaged in animated conversation with Maya, who had flown in from Singapore for the initiative launch. Their genuine connection, professional respect deepened by shared purpose, exemplified the collaborative culture we had built from the ashes of potential conflict. Ready to revolutionize preventative healthcare? Olivia asked as I joined them, her enthusiasm reflecting the sense of purpose that had replaced mere ambition in our shared leadership journey. One algorithm at a time, I replied, matching her optimism with my own quiet confidence. Together, we stepped into the elevator that would carry us toward the next chapter of the Wilson Innovations story, no longer a tale of family business succession, but a continuing narrative of evolution, innovation, and meaningful impact that transcended traditional measures of success. The company I had once fought to protect from what seemed like catastrophic change had ultimately been strengthened by that very disruption. The sister I had initially viewed as an unqualified usurper had become an invaluable partner in building something neither of us could have created alone. And the identity I had once defined exclusively through professional achievement had expanded to embrace multiple dimensions of fulfillment, as business leader in a family transformed by crisis into genuine connection. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.